My best friend is being forced to cancel his marriage. I've known my best friend Ryan since we were both 9 years old. We grew up in the same small Oregon town, spent summers building tree houses, and winters glued to video games in his parents' basement. I always thought we'd go through every life milestone side by side. Graduation, careers, weddings, maybe even being each other's best man. Ryan met Emily 3 years ago at a hiking event. They were that kind of couple that just clicked. She was bright, funny, and had that calm presence that balanced out Ryan's impulsiveness. When he told me he was going to propose, I helped him pick out the ring. I remember how his hands were shaking when he showed it to me. He said, "Man, this is it. She's the one." And for a while, everything seemed perfect. They got engaged last December, and the wedding was planned for early next spring. I was supposed to be the best man. We had a whole weekend getaway planned in Bend for the bachelor party. Emily was deep into planning with her mom, and Ryan couldn't stop smiling every time her name came up. But then, 2 months ago, things started to feel off. Ryan became distant. He'd cancel plans, ignore texts, and when I finally managed to meet him for a beer, he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. I asked him what was going on, and he just sighed, rubbed his face, and said, "It's complicated, man. I don't even know where to start." Apparently, Emily's parents, especially her dad, had started to interfere heavily in the wedding plans. At first, it was small stuff. Her dad, Frank, insisted on covering some expenses, but then began making suggestions that slowly turned into demands. He wanted the ceremony at their family's country club, wanted his friends invited, wanted Emily to keep her maiden name for business reasons, and even went as far as telling Ryan he should consider a more stable career before the wedding. Ryan's an artist. He does commissioned mural work and digital design. He's good at it, and while it's not a traditional career, he's been doing well, but Frank didn't see it that way. He started dropping hints to Emily about how Ryan wasn't husband material yet. Things escalated quickly. Emily started acting nervous and withdrawn. Ryan told me she'd stop talking about the wedding altogether. When he tried to bring it up, she'd say things like, "My dad's just trying to protect me," or "He'll come around once he sees how serious we are." Then, last week, Ryan called me at midnight. I could tell he was drunk, he said. "It's over, man. They're making her call it off." Apparently, Emily's father had given her an ultimatum. Either cancel the wedding or he'd cut her off completely. No tuition help for her younger sister. No financial support. No inheritance. Emily's mom begged her to just wait, to not throw away her future. And Emily caved. She told Ryan she loved him but couldn't go against her family. When Ryan told me this, I could barely believe it. He said she came over to his apartment, cried for 2 hours, and left the engagement ring on the coffee table. That image, him standing there, holding the ring he once picked out so proudly, broke me a little too. Now he's a mess. He's been crashing at my place for a few days. Not really eating, just scrolling through old photos on his phone. I tried to take him out, get his mind off it, but he's barely present every time I mention Emily. His eyes just glaze over. The worst part? Emily keeps texting him. She says she misses him, that she didn't want this, that maybe in the future things could be different. But that's just twisting the knife deeper. I told him he needs to block her, but he can't bring himself to. He keeps saying, "What if she changes her mind? What if she fights for us?" It's been rough watching him like this. I know heartbreak, but this is different. It's like watching someone mourn the loss of a life that almost was. A few days ago, I ran into Emily downtown. She looked pale and miserable. We talked briefly. She said, "I didn't want to hurt him. I just can't go against my family. My dad said he'd never forgive me." She had tears in her eyes, and part of me wanted to yell at her, to tell her she should have stood up for Ryan, but another part of me saw how trapped she looked. When I told Ryan about seeing her, he didn't even react much, just nodded and said, "That sounds like her." Then he went quiet for a long time before whispering, "I still would have married her anyway, even if it was just us in a courthouse." He's talking about moving out of state now, somewhere new where he can focus on his art and start fresh. I think it's the right move. But it hurts knowing this whole situation broke him in ways that might never fully heal. And honestly, I'm angry. Angry that a man like Frank could tear apart two people's happiness because of pride and control. Angry that Emily didn't have the courage to say no. Angry that someone like Ryan, who's loyal to a fault, has to pay for it. Last night, he handed me a box, the wedding invitations that had already been printed. He said, "I can't throw them away yet." Inside, I saw the names Ryan Anderson and Emily Carter printed in elegant gold script. The date was still set for next March. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat there with him in silence. The two of us staring at what should have been the happiest day of his life. Update. It's been almost 2 months since Ryan's engagement fell apart. And honestly, I didn't think things could get worse. But life's got this way of digging the knife a little deeper when you least expect it. After Emily called off the wedding, Ryan really tried to keep himself together. He started painting again, murals mostly, pouring his heartbreak into his work. I'd drop by his studio sometimes and see these massive pieces filled with stormy skies and faceless figures reaching for each other, but never touching. It was beautiful and haunting at the same time. He stopped drinking for a while, started running every morning, even talked about maybe applying for an art residency in Colorado. I thought he was getting better. We all did. Then, last weekend, everything got messy again. I was at a local coffee shop when I saw Emily walk in, with her dad. I didn't even recognize her at first because she'd dyed her hair darker and looked thinner, more fragile. Frank was talking to someone on the phone, loud and commanding like always, and Emily just looked small when she saw me. She froze for a second, then quietly came over. She asked if we could talk outside. I wasn't sure I wanted to, but I followed her anyway. She told me she hadn't spoken to Ryan in weeks but still thought about him every day. She said her father had threatened to take away her trust fund if she ever saw him again. Apparently, Frank had gone as far as calling Ryan's landlord to make sure there would be no contact. That part made my blood boil. Then she told me something that really threw me off. She's engaged again, to someone named Adam, a family friend her father's known for years. The wedding is supposed to happen next summer. She said she doesn't love him, but her parents are relieved she's back on the right path. Her words, not mine. She said it like she was reading from a script someone forced on her. When I told Ryan later that day, he didn't even get angry. He just nodded and whispered, I knew she'd give in. Then he laughed in this hollow, broken way I'd never heard from him before. Guess she found her happy ending, he said, though you could tell he didn't believe it. That night, he packed his things. He told me he couldn't stay in Oregon anymore. Every street corner here reminds me of her, he said. Even the smell of rain feels like her perfume. He drove off the next morning, heading for Denver. Said he had a buddy there who could get him a spot in a shared art studio. For a while things were quiet. I'd get texts now and then. Pictures of his art. A quick, hope you're good, man. He sounded better. Lighter. But then, a few weeks ago, Emily reached out again. She emailed him from some random account, saying she regretted everything. She said her engagement to Adam was just a deal her father arranged to secure some business merger. She begged Ryan to meet her one last time. He didn't tell me right away. I found out after apparently. He drove back into town last weekend. They met at some diner off the highway. According to him, Emily was crying the whole time. She said she missed him, that she'd tried to stand up to her father, but every time she did, he'd threaten her or guilt-trip her. Ryan said she looked completely drained, like someone had stolen all the light out of her. She told him she still loved him, that she wanted to run away, and Ryan, being Ryan, told her he'd go anywhere with her if she was serious. He even offered to buy 2 bus tickets that night, but she hesitated, said she needed time to think. He waited for her at the station for 3 hours. She never showed. When he got back to his hotel room, there was a voicemail from her mother. She told him to leave Emily alone, that she'd chosen her future, and that continuing to contact her would only make things worse. The next morning, Emily's social media was wiped clean. Every post, every picture gone. Ryan called me that night from his car. He sounded completely defeated. I should have known better, he said. She's not free. She never will be. That was 4 days ago. I haven't heard from him since. His phone goes straight to voicemail. His buddy in Denver said he never came back. I've been calling hospitals, motels, nothing. His car isn't at his old place or mine. I don't know where he is. And I'm trying not to assume the worst, but the silence is eating me alive. Yesterday I got an envelope in the mail, no return address. Inside was one of the wedding invitations, creased, smudged with what looked like charcoal fingerprints. On the back, Ryan had written a single line in messy handwriting. Some love isn't meant to survive in cages. I don't know what that means exactly, but it doesn't sound good. I've been checking every art supply store and gallery he used to visit, calling everyone who might have seen him. The police said they can't do much unless he's been missing for a full week, but I can't just sit here. Ryan's more than my best friend. He's my brother. And I refuse to believe this is how his story ends. If he's out there, I just hope he knows someone still believes in him. Because he deserves a love that doesn't have to beg for freedom. Final update. It's been almost 6 months since Ryan disappeared. And for a long time, I didn't think I'd ever write this update. Part of me wanted to believe he'd just gone off-grid for a while. Maybe found a quiet mountain town to start over in. But another part of me feared I'd get a call from the police one day that would confirm my worst nightmare. For the first 2 months, there was no trace of him. His phone stayed disconnected. His bank account showed no activity. His car was gone. I spent every spare hour looking for him, calling art galleries, shelters, even small towns in Colorado, Idaho, and Nevada. I plastered his photo online, hoping someone would recognize him. Nothing then, out of nowhere. I got a message on Facebook from someone named Clara Jensen. She said she managed a small cafe and art co-op in a place called Taos, New Mexico. She'd seen my missing post and thought she might have met Ryan. She said a guy matching his description had been working there under the name Jay. He painted murals for the cafe walls and slept in a camper behind the building. She said he was quiet but kind, always sketching, always alone. I didn't even finish reading before I booked a flight. When I got to Taos, I walked into that cafe, a small, warm place with murals covering every inch of wall space. The moment I saw one of them, I knew it was him. It was a massive piece, 2 figures standing in a storm, their hands reaching toward each other but divided by a wall of glass. His style was unmistakable. Clara took me out back and there he was, sitting on the steps of an old silver camper, barefoot, with paint on his arms and a cup of coffee beside him. He looked up and smiled, like he'd just seen me yesterday. "Hey man," he said. "You found me?" I didn't know whether to hug him or punch him for disappearing like that. I just stood there for a second, trying to find words. He looked thinner, older somehow, like he'd been carrying a lifetime on his shoulders. But there was also a strange peace in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. We talked for hours. He told me everything. After Emily didn't show up at the bus station, he broke down. He said he drove for hours with no direction, just letting the road decide where to take him. He ended up in New Mexico after his car broke down outside Taos. Some older mechanic gave him a lift into town and he just stayed. Started painting to pay for food, then for a place to sleep. He said it was the first time in years he felt free. No expectations, no one trying to fix me or own me, he told me. Just paint, quiet mornings, and people who don't care who I used to be. He asked about Emily, but I didn't have much to tell him, the last I'd heard. Her engagement to Adam went through. Though it seemed more like a business partnership than a relationship, I didn't want to tell Ryan, but he asked directly, and I couldn't lie. He was quiet for a long time after that. Then he said something I'll never forget. I used to think love was about fighting for someone. Now, I think sometimes it's about letting them go so you both stop bleeding. He showed me his new paintings, hundreds of them, stacked against the walls of the camper. They were nothing like his old work. These were brighter, calmer. He'd painted sunsets, fields, mountains, but one painting stood out. It was of a woman standing on a bridge. Looking out at the water, her face wasn't detailed, but I knew who it was. He said, "That's how I want to remember her. Not crying, not trapped, just standing in her own light." When I asked if he was ever coming back home, he smiled faintly and said, "This is home now, I've got peace here. I think that's enough." I stayed with him for a few days, helped him fix the roof of his camper, shared beers by a campfire, and talked about everything and nothing. He told me he's been teaching local kids how to paint. They call him Mr. J. It made me laugh before I left. He handed me something wrapped in brown paper. When I got back to my hotel, I opened it. It was one of his paintings. A man walking down a long desert road with the words, "Keep going," painted faintly in the sky above him. On the back, he'd written, "Don't look for me again. You found me once, and that's enough." I tried to respect that. I really did. A few weeks later, Clara called me again. She said Ryan had moved deeper into the desert, to an artist commune about an hour out of town. No phone, no internet. She said he seemed happy, like someone who finally forgave the world, she said. That was 3 months ago. I haven't heard from him since, but I think he's okay. He finally found the one thing he'd been searching for. Not love, not approval, not closure, just peace. As for Emily, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she left her husband 3 months into the marriage. She's living in Seattle now, teaching art classes for kids. Funny how both of them ended up finding solace in the same thing. Art, Maybe that's the universe's quiet way of saying their connection was never meant to die, just evolve into something else. Sometimes I still get postcards from New Mexico. No return address. Just a small sketch in the corner, mountains, a desert sunrise, a silhouette of two people standing side by side, and every time I get one, I smile. Because I know he's still out there, still painting, still alive. Ryan once told me that not every love story needs a happy ending to be meaningful. Some just need to teach you how to live again. He was right. Stories number 2. My parents' smart money rule that ended up screwing me over. Growing up, my parents drilled one financial rule into my head. Never borrow money, not for cars, not for school, not even for a house unless you could pay cash. They said debt was the root of every problem. Credit cards were traps, loans were scams, and anyone who financed something they couldn't afford outright was, in my dad's words, living stupid when I was a kid. That actually made sense. My parents, Dan and Linda, grew up poor in the Midwest and worked their way into middle-class comfort. They never owed anyone anything. My dad was a mechanic who saved every extra dollar, and my mom was a bookkeeper who could make a grocery budget last 3 weeks. They bought our house outright when I was 10, they loved to say. We own what we have. It sounded responsible. So, I followed their lead. When I got my first job at 19, I paid for everything in cash. I saved for a used car, paid it off instantly, and refused a credit card even when my bank offered one with rewards. My friends were signing up for student loans and talking about building credit, but I thought I was the smart one. Fast forward to when I was 28, and I learned the hard way how wrong they were. I had been renting the same small apartment for 6 years. I worked as an HVAC technician, decent money, nothing flashy but enough to live on. Around that time, I got engaged to my girlfriend, Allison. We started talking about buying a house. I had saved almost $60,000 in a savings account, so I figured we were golden. Then came the reality check. The first time we met with a lender, the guy looked at me like I'd told a joke when he pulled my credit report. It wasn't bad, it was non-existent, he said. You have no credit history at all. You're what we call invisible. I laughed awkwardly and said, Isn't that a good thing? He smiled politely but said, Not really. We have no way to know if you're responsible with credit, so we can't approve you for a loan. Even though I had cash for a 20% down payment, a stable job, and no debt, no one would give me a mortgage. My savings account meant nothing to the algorithm. I felt embarrassed walking out of that office. Allison was supportive, but I could tell she was frustrated. She had good credit, but not enough income to qualify a loan. I went home that night and called my parents. I expected sympathy or advice. Instead, my dad said, Good, stay away from banks. They'll bleed you dry. I tried to explain that it wasn't like that anymore, but he wouldn't hear it. You don't need a house. Renting's fine, debt is debt, even if it's called a mortgage. My mom chimed in about how they never needed credit scores to survive, except they'd bought their house decades ago. In cash, for a fraction of what it's worth now. Times were different. I started researching ways to build credit. I applied for a secured credit card, the kind where you deposit your own money to set the limit. I had to wait 6 months before I even got a score above 600. Another year later, I got a second card. I used them responsibly, paid in full every month, but it took forever to climb out of that invisible hole. During that time, we lost the house we wanted. Prices kept rising, and every time I thought I was ready, the market moved faster than I could catch up. Allison and I had to renew our lease twice. I watched people with student debt and car loans, the very thing my parents warned me about, buying homes before us. When we finally bought a house 3 years later, I had perfect payment history, a solid credit score, and a mortgage at a rate that made me sweat just signing the papers. But I also had resentment, not because I owed money, I was okay with that, but because I realized how much time I lost clinging to their outdated idea of what responsible meant. A few months after moving in, my parents came to visit. My dad walked around the house, hands in his pockets, and said, Well, it's nice, but you'll be paying for this place for 30 years. I looked him in the eye and said, Yeah, and it's the only way I could get it. Not everyone can just pay cash anymore. Dad, he didn't respond right away, just nodded and said, Guess time's changed. That was as close to an admission as I'd ever get, now that I'm in my mid-30s. I try to teach my younger cousins and friends what I wish I'd known earlier. Debt isn't the enemy. Stupidity is. Misusing credit will wreck you. But pretending it doesn't exist will too. My parents weren't trying to hurt me. They genuinely thought they were protecting me, but their no debt ever mindset set me back years. I learned that financial wisdom has an expiration date, and sometimes the advice that kept one generation safe can cripple the next. It took me nearly a decade to unlearn that lesson. And every month when I make that mortgage payment, I think about how long it took just to get the privilege to owe someone money. And how ridiculous that sounds when you say it out loud. Update: it's been about 2 years since I wrote that first post, and a lot has changed, both financially and personally. I never expected that talking about my parents' old-fashioned views on money would lead to hundreds of people sharing their own experiences, but it honestly made me realize how common this story is. A lot of us grew up hearing that credit cards and loans were evil, only to hit adulthood and find out that the system doesn't care how responsible you are if you don't exist in it. After the house situation settled, Allison and I got married in our backyard. We didn't go crazy with the wedding. Just under 40 people. Simple catering and a band one of her coworkers' kids played in. But even for something small, I finally understood the phrase, use credit to your advantage. Instead of draining our savings like I used to, I put all the wedding expenses on a cashback card, paid it off in full afterward, and ended up with enough rewards to cover our flight to Seattle for our honeymoon. That one move made me realize how different life feels when you use credit instead of fearing it. It's not about owing money. It's about control. My credit score climbed into the 780s last year. It still amazes me because I remember being credit invisible not that long ago. I opened a travel card with airline miles, refinanced my car loan at a lower rate, and even helped Allison boost hers after she paid off her student debt for the first time. I feel like I actually understand how money works, not from a survival standpoint, but a growth one. But what really pushed me to write an update wasn't my finances. It was my parents. My dad's health took a turn last winter. Nothing life-threatening, thankfully. But he had to stop working part-time at the shop he ran. He's 69 now, my mom's 67. And they've always lived off savings and a small pension from her old job. When he was laid up, they realized how expensive everything had gotten. Their emergency funds started shrinking faster than they liked, and they didn't want to dip into their retirement accounts. I tried to talk to them about options, refinancing their house, getting a small home equity line of credit, or even a low-interest personal loan. You'd think I'd suggested robbing a bank? My dad immediately said, "We're not borrowing money. We've made it this long without a dime of debt, and we'll die that way." Except that wasn't pride anymore. It was fear disguised as pride. They had the house, sure, but no liquidity, no established credit, and no access to modern financial tools. Even applying for a medical credit card to spread out some costs was impossible because they had no history. My mom actually asked me to co-sign something for them, which I did because there was no other way. That moment hit me harder than I expected, for years. I felt resentful toward them for holding me back financially. Now I was helping them navigate the same system they'd spent their lives avoiding, and paying the price for it. I sat with my dad in his living room one night, paperwork spread across the coffee table, explaining interest rates and FICO scores like I was the parent. He didn't say much, but when I finished, he looked down and said quietly, "Maybe we got too stubborn about some things." That was the closest thing to an apology I'll ever get from him. And honestly, it was enough. Since then, they've started to ease up. My mom finally opened her first credit card, at 67 years old, and she treats that $500 limit like it's nuclear material. But it's progress. She buys groceries on it, pays it off immediately, and laughs every time she checks her perfect payment history. My dad jokes that she's joined the dark side. It's strange to think how much my mindset has flipped. The younger version of me would have seen all this as selling out, playing the system. But now I realize it's not about playing. It's about understanding the rules before they crush you. Allison and I recently started talking about having kids, and I've been thinking a lot about what financial lessons I want to pass down. I want them to know that debt isn't something to fear. It's something to respect. It's a tool, not a trap, and if you know how to use it, it can open doors that cash alone never could. The other night, my dad called me about a refinance offer they got in the mail. I thought he was going to throw it away, but he asked if I could look over it and explain the terms. We spent almost an hour talking numbers and rates. At the end, he laughed and said, "Guess the students become the teacher." I told him I learned it the hard way. Thanks to him, it felt weirdly full circle. For years, I blamed their fear of debt for holding me back. Now I see it differently. They taught me caution. I just had to learn balance on my own. So yeah, The financial myth they passed down did hurt me for a while. But now I'm using what I learned from both their mistakes and mine to build something better. And if someday my kids roll their eyes when I talk about credit, at least they'll know I'm not preaching fear. Just experience. Final update. It's been almost 4 years since I wrote that first post, and looking back, it's wild how much of my life, and my family's, shifted because of one so-called rule. What started as a simple rant about my parents' anti-debt mindset turned into something that changed how we talk about money, trust, and even how we understand each other. After my last update, life got busier. Allison and I had our first child, a little girl named Emily. She's 2 now and obsessed with bubble machines and blueberries. Becoming a parent changed how I think about everything, especially money. I still remember sitting in the hospital holding her, realizing that every choice I make now, from savings accounts to insurance to how we talk about spending, will shape her future the same way my parents' choices shaped mine. That realization hit harder than I expected. A few months after Emily was born, my dad had another health scare, a mild stroke. He's recovered well, but it forced some big conversations. My mom couldn't handle all the bills alone, and since neither of them had much experience managing credit or online payments, I stepped in. I started organizing their finances, automating what I could, and setting them up with accounts that earned a bit of interest instead of letting everything sit in a checking account. They finally agreed to do a small refinance on their house to lower expenses. When the paperwork went through, my dad said something that stuck with me. You know, I spent my whole life trying not to owe anyone anything, but turns out, the only reason I can keep this house is because of you. And that thing I swore I'd never do. That broke me a little, because beneath all his stubbornness was a man who thought control meant isolation. He thought safety meant saying no to help, even from the system itself. And now, I was watching him learn to trust. Not just the system, but me. My mom's gotten surprisingly comfortable with credit now. She has a second card for gas and uses her rewards points to buy little gifts for Emily. She laughs when she checks her statements and says things like, "Look at me. I've got a score now." It's sweet and a little bittersweet. They missed decades of ease because they were afraid of something they never learned to understand. Financially, Allison and I are in a good place. We refinanced our mortgage last year when rates dipped, and we finally finished paying off the remaining wedding costs and home upgrades. We started a college fund for Emily and built a solid emergency fund. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who enjoys checking a spreadsheet, but it's become a quiet source of pride. The best part, though, is the shift in how my parents and I talk. Money used to be a wall between us, a subject full of judgment, and "you're doing it wrong" energy. Now it's become something that connects us. My dad asks me questions about retirement planning, and instead of lecturing, he listens. He even told a neighbor about the importance of having a credit score. Hearing him say that almost made me laugh out loud. There was one evening recently that really summed everything up. We were having dinner at their place, and after dessert, my dad pulled out an old photo album. He showed me a picture from when I was maybe 6. Him standing in front of the house they bought cash, all proud and grinning. He said, "You know, we thought we were doing the smart thing, keeping you safe from all that money nonsense. But maybe we made it too simple. Life's more complicated now." I told him it's not his fault. They did what they knew, and honestly, their discipline taught me things too. Patience, saving, caution. I just had to mix those lessons with reality. Later that night, while we were cleaning up, my mom hugged me and said, "I wish we'd listened sooner." I told her it's okay, because now they're doing fine. And I wouldn't be who I am without their version of smart money. In a strange way, that old financial myth they taught me ended up doing both harm and good. It hurt me when I was young because it kept me out of the system, but it also made me careful. The kind of careful that's rare when you finally do get credit. I learned to respect money, not fear it. And now I can teach Emily the same thing without the extremes. She won't grow up hearing that debt is evil or that credit is king. She'll grow up hearing that money is a tool. And like any tool, it depends on how you use it. The irony is that the very thing my parents resisted ended up being what allowed me to build stability, take care of them, and create a better future for my own family. My dad doesn't say never borrow money anymore. Now he says, just make sure you know what you're signing. That's progress. Sometimes I still think about that first day at the bank, sitting there embarrassed while the lender told me I was invisible. I wish I could go back and tell that version of myself, "You're not doing it wrong. You're just starting from a different place." And maybe that's what I'll tell Emily one day too. You don't have to fear the lessons your parents taught you, but you also don't have to repeat them. You just have to learn where they end and where yours begin. Stories number 3. My boyfriend has been collecting my rent for a free house. I don't even know where to begin with this because I feel so stupid. For the past year and a half, I've been living with my boyfriend, and I just recently found out he's been pocketing the rent money I've been paying him because the house is fully paid off. When I met Tyler, I was fresh out of grad school, broke but working full-time, trying to get on my feet. He was already well established, had a stable job, a decent car, and told me he owned a house that he was still paying off. When we decided to move in together, I offered to pay my share of rent, utilities, groceries, everything. I wanted to be fair and not just move in for free. He said the mortgage was about $2,000 a month, and since I made less than him, I'd pay $1,000 and he'd cover the rest, plus utilities. That sounded fair. So every first of the month, I sent him $1,000 through Venmo with the note rent. It felt normal. We lived comfortably. He handled bills and maintenance. I handled groceries and kept the place clean. I didn't think twice about it. A few weeks ago, his younger sister Megan came to visit. She's 22, a college student, and one night we were drinking wine on the patio when she said something that made my stomach drop. She was reminiscing about their childhood home and mentioned how she missed this place. Confused, I asked what she meant. She blinked and said, "You didn't know this is our parents' old house? Tyler inherited it when Dad passed." I just stared at her. I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. She said it casually, like everyone knew. My heart started pounding, and I asked her again, "Wait, he owns this house outright?" She nodded. "Yeah, our dad paid it off years ago. Tyler just pays taxes and stuff now." I felt like I was going to be sick. I went inside, excused myself, and tried not to cry. I waited until Megan left 2 days later before confronting him. When I asked Tyler about it, he froze. Then he sighed, rubbed his face, and said, "Yeah, okay, it's true, the house is mine. But it's not what you think." Apparently, his reasoning was that rent wasn't really about paying a landlord. It was about contributing equally to living expenses. He said I still lived here, used water, electricity, food, etc., and that the $1,000 was my share. I reminded him that I already pay for groceries and house supplies, and that the understanding from day one was that my portion was for rent, not utilities. If he'd told me it was paid off, I would have suggested we split expenses differently. He tried to flip it around, saying I shouldn't be mad because I still got to live in a nice house for less than market rent. But that's not the point. He lied. He pocketed my money for almost 2 years under false pretenses. The worst part? He laughed when I told him I felt betrayed. Actually laughed, he said, "Babe, it's not that serious. You'd have to pay rent anywhere else. I just used it to improve the house. But I've never seen a single renovation. The furniture came from my old apartment. I paid for most of the kitchen appliances when we moved in because he said his stuff was outdated. I couldn't stop thinking about how much I've given him, nearly $18,000 over this time. Money I thought was helping both of us. He's been sitting on it like a snake, probably using it for his savings, or some vacation fund." I stayed up all night replaying every conversation we'd had about money. Every time I offered to see the mortgage statements, he brushed it off, saying he had it on auto pay. Every time I mentioned maybe buying a house together someday, he said, "Let's wait until my current one's paid off." He lied straight to my face. The next day, I packed a few bags and went to stay with my friend Emily. He's been blowing up my phone ever since. First angry, then apologetic, then guilt-tripping me, saying that I'm overreacting and that relationships shouldn't be transactional. But it was transactional. He made it that way. He set the terms. My mom thinks I should just break up with him and move on. My friend says I should confront him one last time and ask for the money back. Part of me feels like I'll never see that money again. And even if I did, I don't know if I could ever trust him. The betrayal runs deeper than just money. It's the manipulation, the smugness, the audacity to look me in the eyes every month as I Venmo'd him rent and never once tell the truth. I don't even know if I'm angrier at him for lying or at myself for not seeing it sooner. Update: it's been about 3 weeks since I found out the truth about the rent. And honestly, it's been a roller coaster. I didn't plan to post again, but things got a lot messier than I expected. And I think I need to get it off my chest after leaving. I stayed at Emily's apartment for a few days while I tried to figure out my next steps. I wasn't ready to go home to my mom's place across the country. But I also didn't want to stay in the same city as Tyler forever. For those first few nights I felt numb. Then the anger hit. I went through my Venmo history and added it up again. $1,000 a month for 18 months. 18,000 exactly. I took screenshots, printed them, and started thinking, if this had happened in reverse, if I were charging him fake rent, he'd probably be calling me a scammer. When I finally felt strong enough, I texted him saying I wanted to meet in person to talk one last time. He agreed and said he'd make things right. We met at a coffee shop near his place, and the moment he saw me, he acted like nothing had happened. He smiled, leaned in for a hug, and said, "You look tired, you can come home." You know, that broke something in me. I told him flat out, "You lied to me for almost 2 years. You took $18,000 from me under false pretenses. You knew what you were doing." He gave this sigh, like I was the one being unreasonable, and said, "It's not that black and white. I never forced you to pay rent." I told him it wasn't about force. It was about deception. That I thought I was helping pay a mortgage, not padding his savings. He leaned back, crossed his arms, and said, "Well, technically, I did use some of that money for the house, property tax, maintenance, repairs, so it's not like I pocketed all of it." When I asked him to show me receipts, he shrugged. "I don't keep track of every expense." That's when I pulled out the folder with all my Venmo receipts. He looked startled, like he didn't think I'd actually document anything. I told him I wanted the money back, or at least part of it, that I'd take him to small claims court if I had to. He scoffed. "You're seriously going to sue your boyfriend?" I said, "Ex-boyfriend." He called me dramatic, said I was trying to ruin his life over a misunderstanding. And then, get this, he tried to guilt-trip me by saying that if I really loved him, I'd let it go. That was my final straw. I walked out of the coffee shop and didn't look back. I blocked his number that night. A few days later, I got an email from him with a half-hearted apology. He said he didn't mean to deceive me and that he wasn't thinking about how it would look. He offered to pay me back $2,000 total, as a good faith gesture. I almost laughed. I didn't reply. Then things got weird. About a week later, I got a call from his mom. I'd only met her twice. Sweet woman, but a little old-fashioned. She said she heard there'd been a misunderstanding, and that Tyler was devastated. She told me that relationships go through ups and downs, and that money shouldn't ruin love. I asked her if she knew he'd been taking rent money from me for a house he owned outright. She paused for a long time before saying, "Well, that house was left to both my kids. He bought Megan's half out years ago, so he'd been collecting rent on his inheritance." I thanked her for calling and hung up before I said something I'd regret. At that point, I decided to take things a step further. I filed a small claims case. I don't know what'll happen. I might not win. But the court clerk told me I had a reasonable case since the money was exchanged under false representation. Emily's been my rock through all of this. She even helped me move into a new place, a little one-bedroom apartment across town. It's not much, but it's mine. I signed my own lease, paid a real landlord, and when I send my rent, I actually know where it goes. The funny thing is, once word got around, this city's not that big. A few mutual friends started reaching out. One of them, Josh, told me that Tyler had done something similar to an old roommate years ago. Charged him rent for a place his parents owned. That guy moved out after finding out but never took it further. So apparently this is a pattern, last I heard. Tyler's been complaining to everyone that I ruined his reputation and took things too far. I don't care anymore. I've stopped defending myself. I know what happened, and so do the people who matter. The last thing I'll say is this. I've learned more about boundaries, transparency, and self-respect in the past few weeks than in any relationship I've ever had. I used to think love was about trust first, but now I realize it's about honesty and accountability. If someone loves you, they don't build their comfort on your ignorance. I might never see that $18,000 again, but honestly, I've made peace with it, because now I see it as the tuition I paid to learn the hardest, most valuable lesson of my 20s. Never let love blind you to the fine print. Final update. It's been almost 3 months since everything went down with Tyler, and I can finally say I'm on the other side of it. I didn't think I'd ever find peace after that mess. But time, and a good support system, really does help. After I filed the small claims case, Tyler tried to act like it was all bluff. He didn't even respond to the initial notice right away. Then, about a week before the court date, his tune completely changed. I think he finally talked to someone who told him this could actually stick. Suddenly, I got a series of panicked emails from him. He claimed he didn't want things to get ugly, and offered to settle privately if I dropped the case. He said he'd refund me $8,000 if I agreed to sign something saying I wouldn't pursue it further. I thought about it for days. I even consulted one of Emily's co-workers. She's paralegal. And she told me to get everything in writing and never meet him in person. I decided to accept, not because I was forgiving him, but because I wanted closure. $8,000 wasn't everything he took, but it was enough to feel like I got something back for all the lies. I had him wire the money directly, and once it cleared, I filed to dismiss the claim. When I got that confirmation email from the court, it felt like I could breathe again for the first time in months. After that, I completely blocked him on every platform, changed my number, deleted every photo. I didn't want even the digital footprint of him left in my life. The funny thing is, cutting him out made me realize how small my world had gotten when I was with him. I used to think we were this grown-up couple building a future together. But really, I was just orbiting around his life, his house, his rules, his version of fairness. Once I stepped out of it, the silence felt heavy at first, but then freeing. I threw myself into my job again, started going to yoga with Emily, and reconnected with old friends I'd neglected. And one night, while sitting on my little apartment balcony with a glass of wine, I realized something that made me laugh out loud. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking on eggshells. I wasn't checking if my tone would upset someone, or if I was contributing enough to prove my worth. I was just me. A few weeks later, Megan, the sister, reached out on Instagram. I almost ignored her, but her message seemed sincere. She apologized for what her brother did and said she hadn't realized how bad it was until after I left. Apparently, Tyler had been venting to their mom about how I took advantage of him, and Megan shut him down hard. She told him, "You scammed her, and you know it. We talked for a while," and she mentioned their dad left the house to both of them because he trusted Tyler to be responsible. Now she regrets signing over her half. That broke my heart a bit. But it also made me feel validated. Someone in his own family saw the truth. About 2 weeks ago, I bumped into a mutual acquaintance at a farmer's market. She told me Tyler moved in with another girl, a new girlfriend he met at work, apparently. He's been telling people she contributes fairly to the bills. I had to laugh. Maybe that poor woman will catch on sooner than I did. But I'm done being the one who worries about that. Financially, I'm doing okay now. I used part of the settlement money to pay off my credit card debt, and put the rest in savings. I'm being smarter about where my money goes, who I trust with it, and how I structure shared expenses. I even signed up for a basic personal finance course online. It's something I wish I'd done years ago, emotionally. I won't lie, it took a lot of time to stop feeling foolish. I used to replay all the moments when I could have asked harder questions, looked at a bill, or just trusted my gut. But I don't see myself as stupid anymore. I see myself as someone who wanted to believe the best in someone who didn't deserve that faith. There's a difference between being naive and being kind. And I won't let what he did turn me into someone cynical. Sometimes, I still drive by the old neighborhood on my way to work. I pass that house, his house, and instead of feeling anger, I feel relief. Relief that I'm not trapped there anymore. Wondering if I'm paying for something that doesn't exist. Relief that I learned the truth before another year of my life slipped away. I've been journaling a lot, trying to process it all. One of the last entries I wrote was this. I used to think love meant sharing everything. Now I know love also means sharing truth, without honesty. It's just a performance. I'm still figuring things out. How to date again, how to trust again. But I'm not scared of it anymore. Because this time, I'll be doing it as someone who knows her own worth. Not someone trying to prove she's worthy. I'll probably never hear from Tyler again. And that's exactly how I want it. I don't wish him harm, but I hope life eventually teaches him what it taught me. The hard way. You can't build love out of lies and call it fairness. So yeah, I lost $10,000, a relationship, and a bit of innocence. But I gained peace, perspective, and a version of myself that's smarter, braver, and a hell of a lot harder to fool. And honestly, that's worth every penny. Stories number 4. My husband's birthday gift left me, wondering if he knows me at all. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who got upset over a gift. I'm not materialistic. I don't expect luxury or grand gestures. What I value most is thoughtfulness. The feeling that the person giving it to you knows you. Really knows you. That's what love is about to me. So when my husband, Mark, handed me my birthday present this year, I didn't expect the disappointment that would follow. We've been married for 6 years, together for 8. I'm 33 now, he's 35. We've been through a lot together. Job changes, moving twice, even losing my dad a few years ago. We're not perfect, but I always thought we were close. Like, the kind of couple that finishes each other's sentences and laughs over inside jokes from years ago. Every year, we try to make each other's birthdays special. Nothing extravagant, just thoughtful. For his birthday last year, I surprised him with a weekend trip to Nashville, something he'd always wanted to do. I planned it for months, got tickets to a small concert, and even arranged for him to meet one of his favorite local musicians. His face when he realized what I'd done. It made it all worth it. So when my birthday rolled around this year, I figured he'd put at least a little thought into it. Not because I expected payback, but because that's what we do for each other. The morning started fine. He kissed me awake, wished me happy birthday, and said he had a surprise planned for that evening. I spent the day working from home, excited and a little giddy. He came home around 6 with a small box in a store bag and said, "Okay, close your eyes." When I opened them, I saw a silver gray hairdryer set. Not even a high-end one, just a basic drugstore brand I'd seen on sale at Target the week before. I thought maybe he was joking. I even laughed a little and said, "Wait, seriously?" He smiled and said, "Yeah. You mentioned your old one was breaking, so I thought this would be perfect." And that's when I realized he wasn't joking. I stared at it, trying to mask the sinking feeling in my chest. Yes, my old hairdryer had been acting up, but it wasn't something I'd complained about. It wasn't something that meant anything. I mean, it's a hairdryer, a tool, a household item, not a birthday gift from your husband of 6 years. I forced a smile and said, "Oh, thanks, babe. That's practical." He kissed my forehead and said, "I knew you'd appreciate it." Then he went to the couch, turned on the TV, and that was it. No dinner plans, no card, no cake, no thought. I sat there, holding that box in my lap, trying not to cry. Later that night I finally asked, "Did you forget we were going to dinner or something?" He looked confused and said, "No, I thought we'd just stay in." "You like cozy nights at home?" "I do, but not on my birthday. Not when it feels like he didn't even try." I went to bed early, telling him I was tired. He didn't notice I'd been quiet all evening. The next morning, he asked if I liked the gift again. I said it was fine, just fine, and he seemed genuinely happy with that answer. But I wasn't fine. It wasn't about the money or even the effort. It was about how little he seemed to see me anymore. I'd told him months ago that I'd love to take a pottery class, or maybe get a new set of paints. I'd hinted that I wanted to go to that Italian place downtown we'd been saving for a special occasion. He just didn't listen. I ended up venting to my sister, Emma, about it. She was sympathetic but said, "You're kind of setting yourself up for disappointment. Not everyone's good at gifts, but that's not the point, is it? You don't have to be good at gifts to care. You just have to pay attention." The part that really got me happened a few days later. I went into the hall closet looking for batteries and found a receipt from the hardware store, dated the same day as my birthday. My hairdryer had been an impulse buy. He'd gone in to get supplies for his garage project and grabbed it from a shelf near checkout. That crushed me. It wasn't even thought out. It was an afterthought. That night, I confronted him gently. I said, "I found the receipt for the hairdryer. Did you buy it while you were running errands that day?" He didn't even look ashamed. He just shrugged and said, "Yeah, I saw it and remembered you mentioned your old one was dying. I thought it'd be a good multitask." Multitask, he used that word. Like buying his wife's birthday gift was just another box to tick off his to-do list. We got into an argument. I told him I felt unappreciated, like he didn't even try to make the day special. He said, "You're blowing this out of proportion. It's just a birthday. Just a birthday." That's when I lost it, I told him. "It's not about the damn birthday, Mark. It's about the fact that you don't seem to care anymore. You used to plan little surprises, write me notes, bring home my favorite coffee. Now I'm just background noise to you." He went quiet after that. We didn't talk much for the next few days, but something weird happened after that argument. About a week later, I came home from work and found a small box on the table. Inside was a necklace, delicate with a tiny ceramic charm in the shape of a paintbrush. There was a note that said, "Sorry for being an idiot. Pottery class registration is on the fridge." I didn't know whether to smile or cry. We went to dinner that weekend, and he actually listened. Like, really listened. He admitted that he'd gotten lazy about the relationship. He said he didn't realize how much small gestures mattered, because he thought we were past that phase. We're not. No one should ever be past the phase of caring. We're doing better now. I signed up for that pottery class, and he's been helping me make a little space in the garage for it. We've both made a promise to start being more intentional about how we show love. Still, I won't lie. There's a small part of me that can't forget how invisible I felt that day. That sting doesn't just vanish overnight, but I guess that's how relationships are sometimes. Messy, imperfect, full of missteps that either break you apart or teach you something. For us, I'm hoping it's the latter. Because even if the gift wasn't what I wanted, maybe the wake-up call was, update, it's been a little over 2 months since the whole hairdryer birthday fiasco, and I honestly didn't plan to post an update because things felt okay for a while. But a lot has changed, and I think I need to get this out, both for myself and maybe for anyone who's ever felt unseen in their relationship. After my last post, things between Mark and me improved, at least on the surface. The pottery class he got me turned out to be really fun, and I started going every Thursday evening. It was the first time in a while that I had something that felt mine. I'd come home covered in clay, laughing about how bad I was at making mugs, and he'd actually seem happy to see me. He even built me a small shelf in the garage for my projects. For a few weeks I thought we were turning a corner. He was helping around the house more, cooking dinner sometimes, and making an effort to show affection. He'd bring me my favorite iced latte when he came home from work, or leave a note saying, "Can't wait to see what you make tonight." Small things, but they mattered. Then I noticed something strange. One night after class, I came home early because the instructor canceled last minute. When I walked in, Mark was sitting on the couch, talking quietly on the phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the way he spoke made me stop in my tracks. He sounded nervous, gentle, the kind of tone he hadn't used with me in a long time. I heard him say, "Yeah, I'll make it up to you soon. I promise." Then he laughed softly. When he saw me standing there, his face went pale. He quickly hung up and said it was a work call. Something about a late project deadline. I didn't push it right then, but something in my gut twisted. A few days later, while doing laundry, I accidentally knocked his jacket off the chair, and his phone fell out of the pocket. The screen lit up and there it was, a text preview from someone named Jay. It read, "Can't stop thinking about last night. I wish I could say I handled it calmly. I didn't." I confronted him right then and there. At first, he denied everything, saying it was a coworker being inappropriate. But when I asked to see the messages, his whole expression changed. He knew the lie wasn't going to hold. Turns out, Jay was short for Jenna, a woman from his office. They'd been talking for about 2 months. Right around the time after my birthday argument, he swore it wasn't physical, yet, but admitted they'd met for drinks twice and that he felt a connection. That phrase, felt a connection, broke something in me. I sat there listening to him talk about how he'd felt unappreciated, how he thought I'd been distant before my birthday, how he just needed someone to talk to. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I reminded him that I had been the one feeling unseen, that I had been the one begging for emotional effort. He said, "I know, I messed up, I was stupid. I didn't mean for it to go this far, but it did. Because the moment you start giving someone else the attention your partner's been begging for, you've already gone too far." I asked him to leave. He didn't fight it. He packed a bag and went to stay with his brother that night. I thought I'd fall apart completely, but instead, there was this strange calm, like part of me had seen this coming. The emotional distance, the thoughtless gift, the quiet resentment that had been building between us. For a while, I didn't tell anyone. I went to work, went to pottery, came home, and just existed. Then one night at class, my instructor, Lori, noticed I'd been off. She's in her 50s. This kind, no-nonsense woman with wild red hair and the kind of warmth you can't fake. She poured me some tea and said, "Sweetheart, clay doesn't lie. You're shaping it angry." I broke down and told her everything. She listened without judgment, then said something I'll never forget. "When someone stops seeing you, it doesn't mean you disappeared. It means they lost sight of what was in front of them." That hit hard. A few weeks later, Mark came by to pick up the rest of his things. He looked tired, guilty. But not the kind of sorry that comes from real understanding. Just the kind that comes from being caught. He said he ended things with Jenna, that he'd started therapy, that he wanted to earn my trust back, but I couldn't do it. I told him I loved who we used to be, but that version of us doesn't exist anymore. I said I needed to rediscover who I was outside of Mark's wife. He nodded, teary-eyed, and said he understood. Then he left quietly, closing the door behind him. It's been 4 weeks since that day. The silence in the house used to feel unbearable, but lately it feels like peace. I've started painting again, not just pottery. My sister Emma came over last weekend and helped me turn the spare room into a small art studio. She said it's my healing room, and in a strange twist, Lori invited me to display 2 of my pottery pieces at a local art fair next month. When she told me, I cried. Not because of the opportunity itself, but because I finally felt seen again. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe Mark and I will sign the papers and officially end things. Maybe he'll learn from this, maybe I will too, but for now, I'm learning to find joy in my own company. The other day, I passed by a store and saw the same brand of hairdryer Mark gave me for my birthday. For a second, I felt that familiar sting of disappointment. Then I laughed, because that gift, as thoughtless as it seemed, ended up being the spark that forced me to face everything I'd been ignoring. Sometimes life hands you the wrong gift to push you toward the right path. And maybe in a strange way, that was mine. Final update. It's been nearly a year since everything fell apart. And looking back, it feels like I've lived an entirely different lifetime since the day I opened that stupid gray hairdryer box. If you'd told me then that it would become the symbol of the end, and the beginning of so much in my life, I wouldn't have believed you. But here we are. After the last update, things between Mark and me became final. The divorce went through quietly, almost uneventfully. No screaming matches, no drawn-out battles over furniture or accounts. Just 2 signatures and a moment of silence in a courthouse that felt colder than I imagined it would. He didn't look angry or bitter, just hollow. And maybe that's what hurt the most, seeing how 2 people who once planned forever could become strangers standing 3 feet apart. Afraid to meet each other's eyes, he said, "I'm sorry for everything." One last time before walking out. I nodded, but I didn't respond, because at some point, sorry stops meaning anything. It's just a word you say when you can't undo the damage. After that, I took some time off work. I drove up to Portland for a week, stayed in a small Airbnb near the water, and just breathed. I walked along the docks every morning, grabbed coffee from this tiny cafe called Harbor Light, and talked to the owner, an older guy named Walt, who gave me free refills because, in his words, "You look like someone who's been carrying a storm." He was right. I had been when I got back home. I threw myself into art. The pottery class turned into something bigger. I started sculpting, painting, even selling small pieces online. It was never about the money, though. It was about finding pieces of myself in every curve. Every brushstroke. I think creation became my therapy. Then something unexpected happened. One Thursday evening, Lori, the pottery instructor who'd become like a second mom to me, introduced me to her nephew, Evan, who had just moved back to town after working as a photographer abroad. She said, "You 2 are both hopeless artists. Maybe you'll understand each other." I laughed. But when I met him, something clicked immediately. He was nothing like Mark. He didn't try to impress me or talk over me. He listened, really listened. He'd ask about my work, my dad, even my weird obsession with sketching hands. We started hanging out after class, grabbing coffee, visiting art galleries. It wasn't romantic at first. It was easy, natural, like breathing. One night, while walking home after a gallery opening, he asked, "What made you start doing pottery?" I hesitated, then told him the truth. "A hairdryer." He looked at me like I was joking. So I told him the whole story. The forgotten birthday, the argument, the betrayal, the divorce. When I finished, he didn't pity me. He just smiled softly and said, "Sounds like the best worst gift you ever got." That line stuck with me. Because he was right. Over the next few months, things with Evan grew slowly, tenderly. He never pushed for more than I could give. When I'd flinch at small things, like someone raising their voice or making plans without asking, he'd notice immediately and give me space. We built something grounded in calm, not chaos. In the spring, he invited me to help him with a photography exhibit he was curating. My pottery pieces were displayed alongside his photos, a collaboration of texture and light. Seeing my name printed on the exhibit poster made me tear up. After the show ended, Evan surprised me by gifting me one of his framed photos, a close-up shot of one of my ceramic mugs on a windowsill, sunlight pouring through it. On the back he'd written, "You make ordinary things feel alive." That night, I realized I wasn't scared of being loved anymore. I still think about Mark sometimes, not out of longing, but out of gratitude, not for what we had, but for what I learned through losing it. I heard through mutual friends that he left his old job and moved to Denver. Apparently, he's seeing someone new. I genuinely hope he's found a version of himself that doesn't need to hurt someone to figure out what he wants. As for me, I moved into a little bungalow on the edge of town. The garage is now my art studio. Sunlight spilling through the windows. Shelves lined with clay, brushes, and unfinished projects. I sell enough online to cover rent and coffee. And for the first time in a long time, that's enough. Last month, I found the old hairdryer tucked away in a box of things I never unpacked. I almost threw it out, but then I plugged it in. And to my surprise, it still worked. I laughed out loud. So I kept it, not as a reminder of disappointment, but as a symbol of growth. Every time I see it, I think about how something that once made me feel small ended up leading me to everything I am now. Evan joked the other day that I should hang it in the studio and call it the Catalyst. I might actually do it because it's funny, isn't it? How life sometimes gives you exactly what you need, wrapped in the ugliest paper imaginable. Now, I wake up early, make coffee, and open the windows while I work with my hands. The mornings are quiet, peaceful. I can hear birds outside, the hum of life returning. Sometimes I'll glance at that old hairdryer sitting on the shelf. And instead of feeling hurt, I just smile. Because I'm no longer the woman waiting for someone to think of her. I'm the woman who finally thought of herself. And that, more than any gift, is what I truly needed all along. Stories number 5. My family got jealous at my award ceremony and I finally snapped. I'm still a little shaken thinking about what happened that day, because it should have been one of the best moments of my life. But it ended with my entire family storming out of the auditorium. For context, I'm 24 and just finished grad school. I was chosen for a pretty big academic award that only one person from each program gets per year. It's something I worked toward for years, often balancing 2 part-time jobs and late nights while everyone else seemed to have their parents helping them out. My boyfriend Ryan has been my rock through all of it. We've been together 4 years. His parents, Laura and Greg, treat me like their own daughter. They've come to every presentation, sent me care packages during finals. Even helped Ryan and me move apartments last year when my family couldn't. Now that part, couldn't, is important. My parents, Tom and Denise, and my grandparents, Carl and June, have always been emotionally distant. They love the idea of me being successful, but they've never really supported me in practical ways. When I was little, my grandparents spoiled my cousins, but would act like helping me with anything beyond a birthday card was enabling laziness. My parents weren't much better. Always working, always too busy, and when they did show up, it was to criticize, not encourage. So when the school announced the award ceremony, I didn't think twice about who to invite. Each recipient got 4 guest tickets. I gave 2 to Ryan's parents and 2 to some close friends from my program. I didn't even tell my family about it, partly because I assumed they wouldn't come, mostly because I didn't want them to ruin it. Fast forward to the ceremony, it was beautiful. Ryan's mom cried when my name was called. His dad stood up to clap, proud like it was his kid up there. Afterward, we took pictures together. And for once, I felt like I had a family who was proud of me. Then came the fallout. Apparently, my mom found out about the ceremony from a distant cousin who saw something on Facebook. She called me that night while I was still at dinner celebrating. Her tone was all fake sweet. "So, we heard you got an award today. How come nobody invited us?" I told her honestly, because it was only 4 tickets. And I wanted to invite people who have actually supported me. Dead silence. Then, "That's really hurtful. You know, we're your family," I said. "Right, but family's supposed to show up before the success part." She hung up after saying she needed to think about how cruel I'd become. By the next morning, my dad had texted me a long message about how disappointed they were that I'd chosen strangers over blood. My grandmother chimed in with a guilt-trip message about forgetting where you came from. At first, I ignored them. I was still riding that high from the ceremony. But a few days later, I went over for Sunday dinner out of guilt. Big mistake. As soon as I walked in, my grandparents were whispering loudly enough for me to hear. My dad said, "So, how are your real parents at your big night?" And my mom rolled her eyes like she was the victim. I tried to stay calm. I said, "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. But you guys never seemed interested in these things before," my grandmother snapped. "We didn't know because you never tell us. You're always hiding your life from us." And something in me just broke. I looked right at them and said, "You're right, I didn't tell you, because every time I have, you've made me feel small or ungrateful. You've skipped my graduations, ignored my accomplishments, and now that other people actually showed up, you're mad? You weren't invited because you never acted like you wanted to be there in the first place." The room went silent. My dad stood up like he was going to say something, but my mom started crying. My grandmother muttered, "How dare you talk to us like that after everything we've done?" I said. "What exactly have you done?" Because all I remember is being told not to expect too much from people. Then my grandpa said something that completely soured the moment. "You've always been ungrateful? Maybe that's why no one wanted to help you?" I grabbed my bag, told them to enjoy their dinner, and left. Ryan was waiting in the car outside. I got in, shut the door, and just cried. He didn't say anything. Just reached over and held my hand while I tried to calm down. Later that night, his mom called and told me she was proud of me for standing up for myself. That meant more than she'll ever know. Since then, my family's been giving me the cold shoulder. My mom sent a text saying she's heartbroken that I value outsiders more than my own parents. I didn't reply. My grandmother wrote a Facebook post clearly about me. Something about kids these days forgetting their roots. My dad hasn't said a word. The thing is, I'm not angry anymore. I'm just tired. For years, I chased scraps of attention from people who only cared about appearances. When they saw that someone else stepped into the role they abandoned, it wasn't love they felt. It was jealousy. Ryan and I printed a photo from the award night. Me holding the plaque, him and his parents smiling on either side. It sits on our bookshelf now. Every time I look at it, I remember how happy I felt that day. Not because I won something, but because I finally saw what real support looks like. And if that means my parents and grandparents feel left out now, maybe that's the first time they're getting a taste of how I've felt my whole life. Update. It's been about 6 months since the award ceremony, and a lot has happened since then. I didn't expect that one argument over a few tickets would change so much, but it ended up reshaping how I see my family, and how I define what that word even means. After that dinner blow-up, I didn't reach out to my parents or grandparents. I figured they'd cool off eventually, but they didn't. A couple of weeks later, I got a long message from my mom. She said she and my dad were hurt beyond words, and that they couldn't believe I'd embarrassed them in front of everyone. Apparently, word about the argument spread through the family grapevine, and they'd been venting to my aunts and uncles about how I've changed since meeting Ryan's family. That part made me laugh a little, because yeah, I have changed. I'm not the same quiet, people-pleasing kid they could guilt into anything. At first, I tried to respond calmly. I wrote back that I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. I just didn't want to pretend anymore that we had a close, supportive relationship when we didn't. My mom replied with a 2-word text. "You're ungrateful." That was the last thing she said to me for months. Meanwhile, Ryan's parents doubled down on being incredible. Around Thanksgiving, they invited us to their place in Ohio. It was small, cozy, and full of warmth. Exactly the kind of holiday I always wanted. They had photos of Ryan growing up all over the walls, and one of the empty frames was waiting for a picture of the 4 of us together. His mom said, "You're part of the family now." I almost cried into my mashed potatoes. When we got back, I found out through Facebook that my family had their own Thanksgiving, complete with a caption from my grandma. Some people forget who their real family is, but we still give thanks for those who remember. It didn't even sting that much. It just confirmed what I already knew. They cared more about how things looked than how they actually were. Then Christmas came. I wasn't sure if I should send gifts or cards. Ryan told me to do whatever would give me peace, not guilt, so I mailed simple cards, no long letters. Just, "Hope you have a good holiday." My grandparents sent theirs back unopened. My parents didn't respond, but here's the surprising part. I felt fine. In the past, I would have been crushed. Now, I just felt free. I stopped waiting for them to change. I stopped thinking of love as something I had to earn. Then something happened in February that tested that peace. My grandfather fell and broke his hip. My mom called, not to apologize, but because she needed help driving him to appointments. She said, "We don't have anyone else, and you're the only one who can take time off work." That call was tough. I didn't want to be cruel, but I also didn't want to be used. I told her, "I'm sorry he's hurt, but you've made it pretty clear. I'm not part of the family anymore. You should probably call one of the people who remembered you." She started crying. But I didn't back down. After that, I blocked her number for a while. I just couldn't keep playing the same game. In the meantime, my life actually got better. I started a new job at a small research firm. The first day I walked in, I saw my award framed on my boss's wall. He told me he'd been at the ceremony that night and remembered my presentation. It felt like the universe throwing me a sign that I'd done the right thing. Ryan and I also moved into a new apartment closer to his parents. They helped us decorate, and his mom insisted on hanging a shelf for my award in the living room. It sounds silly, but it felt symbolic. Like the recognition my own family couldn't give me was finally finding a home. Then, just last month, I ran into my mom at the grocery store. She looked older than I remembered, tired, like life had been heavy lately. She smiled awkwardly and said, "Hi, honey," like nothing had happened. I nodded, said hello, and kept moving. She followed me to the produce section and said, "You really don't want to fix things?" I said, "You can't fix something that was never built." She didn't have a response, just that look, the mix of guilt and disbelief that comes when someone realizes they can't control you anymore. I walked out of that store shaking, but for the first time. It wasn't from anger, it was relief. Ryan and I are doing great. His parents are helping us look at houses. And when we talk about the future, maybe marriage, maybe kids, I already know what kind of family I want to create. One where love doesn't come with strings attached. People online sometimes say, blood doesn't make family, love does. It used to sound cheesy to me. Now, it feels like the truest thing I've ever learned. Maybe one day my parents will see that too, but until then, I've stopped waiting for their applause. I already got my award in more ways than one. Final update. It's been a little over a year since everything went down, and this will probably be the last time I talk about it. Writing this feels like closing a chapter that's been open most of my life. One full of trying too hard, explaining too much, and hoping people would suddenly become who I needed them to be. I wish I could say that time healed things with my parents and grandparents, but the truth is, it didn't, and I've made peace with that. After that last encounter at the grocery store, I didn't hear from my mom or dad for months. My grandmother sent one of her classic guilt trip letters, handwritten, full of family means forgiveness lines. But there wasn't a single "I'm sorry" anywhere in it. I threw it away. Then in late spring, my cousin got married. Ryan and I were invited, but I hesitated. My family was going to be there, and I didn't want a scene. Ryan encouraged me to go anyway. He said, "You don't owe them anything, but you don't have to hide either." So I went. It was awkward. My parents acted like we were distant acquaintances. My mom gave me a stiff hug and said, "You look well." My dad avoided eye contact entirely. My grandparents were polite but cold. The whole night felt like I was sitting across from people who'd read my life story, but didn't believe a word of it. At one point, I overheard my grandmother telling another relative that kids these days cut off their families for no reason. I didn't even bother responding. I just smiled at Ryan, danced with him, and focused on the people who actually wanted me there. That night, something clicked for me. I don't have to keep hoping they'll suddenly see me. They've had 24 years to do that. They just don't want to. Not long after that, Ryan proposed. It was quiet, intimate, and absolutely perfect. Just us and a picnic in the park where we had our first date. I said yes without hesitation. When we started planning the wedding, the guest list brought back every bit of family baggage I'd been trying to ignore. Ryan's parents offered to host part of it, and his mom even said she'd help with the planning. I wasn't sure whether to invite my parents. Ryan told me it was my call, no pressure either way. I thought about it for weeks. Finally, I sent them an email. Not an invite, just a message I wrote. "I wanted to let you know I'm getting married. You're not being left out, but I'm also not pretending things are fine when they're not. If you want to come, it'll mean accepting that Ryan's family is part of my life, not competing with them. If that's too hard, I understand." They didn't reply for 2 months. Then, a week before the wedding, my mom sent a short text. "We'll stay home. Hope it's a nice day." And you know what? It was. The ceremony was small, outdoors, surrounded by people who actually love us. Ryan's parents gave speeches that made me cry. My best friend officiated. The air felt light, no tension, no judgment, no pretending, just peace. At one point, during dinner, Ryan's dad stood up and said, "When we met her, we knew she was something special. We didn't know we'd get lucky enough to call her family." Everyone clapped. And I cried again because in that moment, I realized how deeply different love feels when it's given freely. A few days after the wedding, my mom sent me a message saying she'd seen pictures online. She wrote, "You looked beautiful. I wish we could have been there." I replied, "You could have been." That was the last thing I said to her. Since then, I haven't looked back. My life is calm in a way it's never been before. Ryan and I bought a house near his parents, and I finally feel like I have roots. Not because of blood, but because of choice. We host Sunday dinners sometimes, and it still catches me off guard that they feel warm and easy instead of strained and performative. Sometimes I think about the version of me who used to beg for scraps of affection, who kept waiting for people to say, "We're proud of you." I wish I could tell her she'll find that pride elsewhere, and it'll be real. My award, the one that started all this, still sits on a shelf in our living room. I used to think it represented all the hard work I'd done alone, but now it reminds me of something different. The moment I stopped settling for conditional love. I've learned that family isn't defined by who shares your blood, but by who shows up when it matters, who cheers when you win, comforts you when you fail, and stays when things get uncomfortable. My parents and grandparents didn't lose a daughter or granddaughter that night at the ceremony. They just didn't recognize the woman who finally stopped chasing their approval. And I didn't lose them either. I just stopped waiting for them to be someone they'll never be. So this is where I leave that story. Not bitter, not broken, just free. Stories number 6. My brother needs to change his habits before college. I, 26F, have a younger brother, Jake, 18M, who's starting college in a couple of months, and I'm really worried he's walking straight into a wall. I know I probably sound like some controlling older sister, but I swear, I'm just trying to save him from self-sabotage. The issue is, Jake has 0 life skills, terrible habits, and this weird sense of entitlement that my parents have totally enabled. For context, our parents are good people, but they baby him to a ridiculous degree. Growing up, Jake was always the golden kid. He's smart, charming, and people usually love him instantly. But he's also lazy, like Olympic-level lazy. He never had chores, never cooked for himself, and my mom even did his laundry until last month. He doesn't wake up before noon on weekends. And during the pandemic, he basically turned nocturnal. I moved out when I was 21 and worked my way through college while balancing 2 part-time jobs. I learned the hard way how to manage bills, cook, and budget. Meanwhile, Jake has never had a job. My parents said they wanted him to focus on school. He got into a decent university, out of state. And everyone's thrilled for him. But I keep asking myself, how is he going to survive out there when he can't even remember to shower without being reminded? A few weeks ago, I went home for the weekend, and things came to a head. It started with something small. My mom asked me to make dinner while Jake played video games in the living room. After cooking, I called everyone to the table. Jake came in, grabbed a plate, and sat down without helping or saying thank you. I asked him to at least load the dishwasher after, and he rolled his eyes and said, "That's Mom's job." I laughed because I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He legit believes housework just magically gets done. That was my snapping point. After dinner, I pulled him aside and told him, "You're about to move out and live on your own. You need to learn how to do basic things or you're going to crash and burn." He shrugged, said he'd figure it out and that college isn't that hard. So I decided to test that theory. I told him, "Okay, pretend you're already at school. It's Sunday. You need clean clothes and food for the week. What's your plan?" He just stared at me and said, "I'll probably Uber Eats or something, laundry. I'll take it home when I visit." I told him that was unrealistic. Especially since he's going to be 3 states away, he said. "Then I'll just buy new socks or whatever." I swear, I thought my brain was going to explode. That night, I sat him down and gave him a list of things he needed to learn before college. Laundry, grocery shopping, basic cooking, cleaning, and managing a budget. He immediately got defensive. He said I was treating him like a kid and that college isn't survival training. I told him it kind of is. My parents heard the argument and, instead of backing me up, they told me I was stressing him out and that he'll learn in his own time. My dad even said, "You were independent early." "But not everyone's like that," I said. "There's independent, and then there's completely unprepared." Jake started yelling that I was just jealous because he's going to a better school than I did. That one hurt? I worked my butt off to pay for school? He's getting his tuition covered by my parents. I told him, "You have no idea how lucky you are, and you're wasting it by acting helpless," he said. "It's not my fault Mom and Dad actually want to help me." So I told him flat out, "You're not a kid anymore, Jake. If you don't grow up before college, you're going to make your life, and everyone else's, 10 times harder." He stormed off and refused to talk to me the rest of the weekend. My parents said I should have just let him enjoy his summer. They told me I was too harsh, and that college will mature him naturally. But I've seen what happens when people like him hit reality. They get overwhelmed, fail classes, burn through money, and end up calling home for rescue every week. When I left on Sunday, I stopped by his room and tried to make peace. I told him I wasn't trying to control him. I just wanted him to be prepared. He ignored me, eyes glued to his game, and said, "You don't have to worry about me." That might have been the first time I realized he really doesn't think he needs to change. Fast forward to last week, my mom called me, frustrated because Jake didn't register for his dorm meal plan and missed the deadline. She was panicking because now they have to file an appeal to get him added late. I bit my tongue because it wasn't my business anymore. But it was hard not to say, this is exactly what I meant. Then yesterday, she called again, saying he blew through the $500 they gave him for college prep on new gaming gear. He told her he needed it to relax before classes start. I laughed bitterly and said, good luck when he calls you from campus asking for grocery money. I guess I just don't know where the line is anymore. Am I being a nagging sister, or am I the only one actually seeing the iceberg ahead? I want him to succeed, but it feels like no one, especially him, understands that success doesn't just appear. It takes effort, planning, and discipline, all things Jake refuses to learn. When I think about him leaving home, I picture this bright, capable kid who's about to walk straight into chaos because no one bothered to tell him that adulthood doesn't care how charming you are. I tried to tell him I tried to help, but now, I think the only thing left to do is let him fall, and hope he figures out how to stand up again. And even though it breaks my heart, I think that might be the only way he'll ever learn. Update. It's been about 4 months since I wrote that post, and a lot has happened since then. Jake's been in college for a full semester now, and let's just say, my prediction wasn't exactly wrong. When he first moved into his dorm, my parents made a whole event out of it. Drove 6 hours, decorated his room, stocked him up with snacks and toiletries, even set up his mini fridge. They came back bragging about how mature he seemed and how he handled the move really well. I didn't say anything because, honestly, I was just hoping maybe he had stepped up a little. Maybe he'd surprise me. That hope lasted about 3 weeks. I got a call one evening while I was working late. It was Jake. He sounded frazzled, which immediately got my attention. I thought maybe something serious had happened, but nope. He called because he didn't know how to use the washing machines in his dorm building. He said they didn't look like the ones from YouTube. I told him there should be instructions posted nearby, but he said someone had ripped the paper down. I started walking him through it over FaceTime, but halfway through he goes, "Wait, do I put detergent in with the clothes or before?" I swear I almost lost it. Then a week later, he called again. This time he needed money because he spent his food budget on takeout. I asked if he'd tried using the dining hall. He said, "I don't like the food there. It's too healthy," I told him. "Jake, you can't live off DoorDash?" His response, "You sound like Mom." I could practically feel my blood pressure spike. A few days after that, my mom called me. She said Jake had gotten a warning from his RA because his dorm room smelled horrible. Apparently, he'd been leaving food containers everywhere and hadn't taken out his trash for almost 2 weeks. His roommate complained, and when the RA checked, she found open soda cans, half-eaten pizza, and piles of dirty clothes everywhere. When I heard that, I honestly didn't even know what to say. I love my brother, but I was just embarrassed for him. My mom tried to brush it off, saying, "He's just adjusting." But I could tell she was worried. My dad, on the other hand, was livid. He told Jake to get it together, but Jake hung up on him. The next week, Jake's roommate moved out. Literally moved out mid-semester. I found out through Facebook because the guy posted about transferring dorms and said something like, "Never room with someone who thinks trash cans are optional." I knew instantly who he meant. After that, things got worse. Jake started skipping classes. He told my parents he didn't vibe with his professors. My mom told me he was calling home more and more, asking for money, complaining that college was too stressful. She even drove down one weekend to help him reorganize his dorm. When she got there, she found him sleeping on a bare mattress because he hadn't washed his sheets once since moving in. They smelled so bad she threw them out and bought new ones. I wish I was exaggerating. When she got back, she called me crying. She said she didn't realize how unprepared he really was. She said, "You were right. We should have made him take more responsibility before he left." I didn't say, "I told you so," even though I wanted to. I just told her, "He can still learn, but you can't keep rescuing him." A few weeks later, he called me again, but this time his tone was different. He sounded defeated. He told me he'd failed a midterm because he missed the deadline for an online assignment. He said he didn't realize professors don't send reminders. I told him, "That's how college works. You have to manage your own schedule," he said quietly. I don't think I was ready for this. That was the first time he'd ever admitted that. I didn't rub it in. I just told him, "That's okay, Jake. You can still turn things around. You just have to start now." I think that was our first real conversation in months. Since then, he's been trying a little. He started using a planner. My mom mailed him one, of course. He called me last week to brag that he cooked pasta from scratch. It was just spaghetti with jar sauce. But still, he's actually doing his laundry regularly now. And his roommate replacement apparently hasn't moved out yet, which is progress. The funniest part? He texted me last night asking for cheap meal ideas for broke college students. I nearly cried laughing, because that's the same phrase I used to Google when I was his age. I sent him a bunch of easy recipes and told him how proud I was that he's at least trying. He said, "I wish I listened to you earlier, that one hit me. It's been hard watching him stumble. But at least he's learning. Slowly, painfully, but genuinely. I don't know if he'll ace this semester. He might have to retake a class or two. But I think this was the wake-up call he needed. My parents have finally stopped babying him too. My mom said she's not sending extra money anymore unless it's an emergency. My dad's been telling him to apply for a campus job next semester. Jake didn't love that idea, but he didn't argue either. I think the reality of adulthood finally sank in for him. Sometimes I still feel guilty for being so harsh before he left. I know my delivery wasn't perfect, but looking back, I think he needed someone to call him out honestly. If I hadn't, maybe he wouldn't have realized how much he needed to change until it was too late. He's coming home for winter break next week, and I told my parents to let him cook dinner at least one night. He agreed, but said, "Don't expect it to taste good," I told him. "Doesn't matter, just try." And I think that's the whole point now. He's finally trying. Final update? It's been almost a full year since that first post, and I honestly can't believe how different things are now. Jake just finished his first year of college, and while it wasn't smooth sailing, I can finally say I'm proud of him. Like, genuinely proud. Not the forced, "I'm your sister so I have to say that" kind of proud. When spring semester started, Jake went back to school early to work a part-time job in the campus bookstore. That alone shocked everyone. My dad told me he didn't even suggest it. Jake applied on his own, apparently. One of his professors told the class about on-campus job openings, and Jake decided to try being a grown-up for once. As he put it, it's only 10 hours a week, but he's been consistent. He even told me the first paycheck felt like magic. He's still Jake. Of course, he's not suddenly Mr. Responsibility, but he's learning. He bought a cheap coffee maker so he'd stop spending $5 a day at the cafe, and he's been cooking more. He sent me a photo of some chicken and rice he made, proudly captioned, "Chef Jake." The rice looked overcooked and the chicken was pale, but I nearly cried laughing. He said, "Hey, it's edible." And that's progress. He's also gotten better with his grades. Last semester he barely scraped by with C's and 1 D, but this time he pulled off 2 B's and an A-. When I asked what changed, he said, "I just stopped waiting for people to tell me what to do." That line hit me harder than I expected. As for our relationship, we've actually grown closer. There's no more shouting matches or lectures. Now, he actually asks for my advice. A few weeks ago, he called because he was stressing about balancing work and classes. I told him the same thing I wish someone had told me when I was his age. "You're not supposed to have it all figured out. You just have to keep trying," he said. That's the first thing you've said that didn't sound bossy, fair. When he came home for summer break, I barely recognized him. Not physically, but in the way he carried himself. He still sleeps in, still raids the fridge at midnight, but there's a difference now. He washes his own dishes, he helps without being asked, and he offered to mow the lawn last week, which made my dad practically tear up. At dinner the other night, he brought up that fight we had before he left for college. He said, "I used to think you were just trying to make me feel bad. Now I get it. You were trying to get me ready," I told him. "You had to want it for yourself. You can't force someone into adulthood." He nodded and said, "Yeah, but you gave me the shove I needed." It was one of those rare, quiet moments where everything came full circle. Even my parents have changed. My mom admitted she wishes she'd listened to me sooner. She said it was hard for her to let go of taking care of him because he was her baby. But seeing him actually handle things on his own made her realize that protecting him too much was really just holding him back. Jake's planning to stay on campus this summer to take one online class and keep working part-time. He said he wants to learn how to live without training wheels. I could have hugged him through the phone. I think what surprised me most was how much this whole thing changed me, too. When I first wrote that post, I was frustrated, judgmental, and maybe a little self-righteous. I'd been through the grind, and I wanted Jake to just get it instantly. But watching him stumble, fail, and eventually figure it out made me realize something. Growing up isn't about knowing what to do. It's about learning to do it, even when you don't. We all have to crash into reality at some point. His just came later than mine, a few days ago. We were sitting on the porch just talking, and he said, "College didn't make me mature, failing did." And I thought, that's exactly it. Sometimes the only way people learn is by falling flat on their face and realizing no one's there to pick them up anymore. I told him how proud I was of him, and that I'd always have his back, even if we fight sometimes. He said, "Yeah, I know, you're annoying, but you're a good sister." Then he threw an ice cube at me. Typical Jake. If you'd told me a year ago that this lazy, spoiled kid would be paying his own bills, doing his own laundry, and calling me for recipe ideas, I wouldn't have believed it, but here we are. He's not perfect, no one is, but he's growing up. Finally, and I think for the first time, he's starting to like who he's becoming, and maybe, so am I. Stories number 7. He said the baby was crying, but the monitor proved otherwise. I never thought I'd be the type to second-guess my own reality. But lately, I feel like I'm living in some twisted version of gaslighting meets sleep deprivation. I'm a new mom, my daughter is 4 months old, and between feedings, diapers, and the bone-deep exhaustion that comes with parenthood, I've been hanging on by coffee and willpower alone. But this, what my husband did, hit a nerve I didn't even know existed. It was 2 nights ago. I just managed to get Ellie down for the night, which is a small miracle in itself. She's been fussy lately, teething maybe, and every night feels like a strategic operation. I'd finally laid her in the crib around 10:30 p.m., double-checked the baby monitor, and crawled into bed next to Ryan. I don't remember falling asleep. It was one of those nights where your eyes just close, and the next thing you know, it's morning. When I woke up, Ryan was already in the kitchen making coffee, which is rare because I'm usually the early one. I walked in, groggy, still wearing the oversized hoodie I'd probably lived in for 3 days straight. He looked at me, that half smirk on his face that used to be charming but lately feels more patronizing. He said, "Rough night, huh?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" He took a sip of coffee, shrugged like it was nothing, and said, "You didn't hear Ellie crying last night? Around 3? I had to get up because you were out cold. She was bawling. Immediately guilt slammed into me. That kind of guilt only a mom feels. The idea that my baby was crying and I didn't wake up, didn't hear her, made my chest tighten. I started apologizing, saying I must have been dead tired. He just said, "Yeah, you were," with this tone that wasn't angry, but definitely condescending. But something didn't sit right. I've been hypervigilant since Ellie was born. The slightest sound from her monitor wakes me. My instincts are on overdrive, and I couldn't remember hearing anything that night. Not a whimper, not a shuffle, nothing. So, after Ryan left for work, I checked the monitor history. It's one of those smart baby monitors with motion and sound detection. Time-stamped alerts, the works. I scrolled through the night minute by minute, nothing. The timeline was clean from 10:45 p.m. to 6:32 a.m., when Ellie stirred lightly and I woke up. No crying, no movement, no sound spikes. I watched the playback just to be sure. Fast-forwarding through the feed, Ellie didn't even twitch. She slept straight through. My stomach dropped. Why would he say she cried if she didn't? At first, I thought maybe he misheard something. Maybe a noise outside. Maybe a dream. But when I texted him saying, "Hey, I checked the monitor. Ellie didn't wake up at 3, he replied with, "Oh, really?" I definitely heard her crying. Maybe the monitor glitched. The monitor didn't glitch. It synced to my phone and the camera's data storage. I checked. There was nothing. That's when the irritation started turning into anger. I asked him again that night, trying to sound calm. "Hey, are you sure Ellie was crying last night? Because I checked the monitor. No alerts, no footage. Nothing." He just shrugged again and said, "Then I guess I'm crazy. But you were dead asleep. I figured I should handle it since you needed rest." It wasn't the words. It was how he said them. Like he was doing me a favor I didn't deserve. Like he wanted credit for something that didn't happen. Now here's where it gets weird. The next night, I decided to be cautious. I stayed up later, around 2 a.m. Watching the monitor, Ellie was fine, peaceful. Ryan got up once to go to the bathroom, glanced into her room, and then came back to bed. The next morning, guess what he said? She was crying again around 3. You didn't wake up. But I went in. I felt my blood go cold, because I knew she hadn't. I'd been awake until nearly 3:30. I'd watched her sleep, barely blinking, so I asked, "Ryan, what exactly did you hear?" He paused, then said, "Just her usual crying. Maybe it stopped before the monitor picked it up." It made no sense. The monitor's mic is sensitive enough to pick up breathing. That's when I realized it wasn't about Ellie at all. He wanted to make me look like I wasn't doing enough. Like I was too tired, too inattentive, too checked out as a mom. He's made small comments before, about how I sleep like a rock, or how I need to pull my weight since he's working full-time. I've brushed them off, blaming stress, exhaustion, postpartum hormones, but this felt deliberate. The next day I decided to test something. Before going to bed, I moved the monitor so it also caught the nursery door. That way, if anyone went in, I'd see it, sure enough, around 2:58 a.m. Ryan got out of bed. He opened Ellie's door, stood there for maybe 20 seconds, then came back out. Ellie never stirred. In the morning, he told me again. Ellie was crying last night, but don't worry. I took care of it. I confronted him right then. I said, no, she wasn't. I saw you go in the room, and she was sleeping the whole time. Why are you saying that? He blinked, didn't even flinch, just said, wow, you're checking the camera now? That's kinda creepy, don't you think? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He flipped it on me, accused me of being paranoid, of spying on him, said I needed to calm down and that maybe motherhood was getting to me. That's when something inside me snapped. I told him that if he ever tried to make me doubt myself like that again, we'd have a serious problem. He got defensive, saying I was making a big deal out of nothing. But this isn't nothing. This is him inventing situations where he plays the hero. And I look like the negligent mom. Now I'm fuming. I don't know if he's doing it to make me feel guilty or to build some kind of narrative that he's the responsible parent. But it's cruel, especially when I'm already running on fumes, trying to keep everything together. I haven't told anyone else yet, not even my mom or best friend. But I've started keeping notes. I screenshot the monitor data, the timestamps, the notifications. If he's trying to mess with my head, I'm not letting him get away with it. And part of me hates that I have to even think this way about my own husband. The worst part? When I look at Ellie, her tiny face, her trust, her peace, I realize I'm fighting not just for my sanity, but for her too. Because if this is the beginning of some twisted power game, it won't stop here, so no, I don't think I'm overreacting. I think I'm finally waking up, and this time, it's not to a crying baby. It's to the sound of someone trying to rewrite the truth right in front of me. Update, I've been sitting on this for almost 2 weeks now, trying to decide if I was being too emotional or if I really needed to trust my gut. Spoiler, I should have trusted it from the beginning. After that confrontation, things between Ryan and me turned tense. The kind of tense where the air in the house feels thicker, like even the walls are waiting for the next argument. He didn't bring up the crying again for a few nights, but his behavior shifted. He started hovering. If Ellie so much as whimpered during the day, he'd rush over, snatching her up before I even had a chance to move. At first, I thought he was just trying to help, maybe trying to make up for the weirdness. But it wasn't help. It was performative. If I was feeding her, he'd comment, make sure she's actually swallowing, not just comfort nursing. If I was changing her diaper, he'd say, you didn't fasten that tight enough. She'll leak. If she started crying while I was showering, he'd knock on the door. You didn't hear her? She's been crying for a minute now. Every single thing became a subtle jab. I started keeping notes, literal timestamps in my phone. Matching them to the monitor data, I wasn't even trying to prove him wrong anymore. I just needed to know I wasn't losing my mind. One morning, about 4 days after that last argument, I woke up to Ryan sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open. I glanced over his shoulder and realized he was messaging someone, his sister, Megan. Now, normally I wouldn't care, but I caught a glimpse of what he was typing before he minimized the screen. She slept through Ellie crying again last night. I don't know what to do anymore. My heart dropped into my stomach. I said nothing at first. I didn't want to explode. I wanted to be strategic, so I went about the morning as usual, making coffee, feeding Ellie, pretending everything was fine, but inside my pulse was hammering. Later that afternoon, when he left for work, I called Megan. We've never been super close, but she's always been friendly. Someone I thought I could trust. I told her I saw his message, that the monitor showed no crying, and that I needed to understand why he'd say that. She hesitated for a moment, then sighed and said, he's been worried, you know. He thinks you've been really tired lately. He mentioned you've been kind of disconnected. Disconnected? I've been devoted. The only time I'm disconnected is when I'm passed out from sheer exhaustion after keeping a tiny human alive all day. I told her as calmly as I could that Ryan was lying. Not mistaken. Lying. that I had physical proof that Ellie hadn't cried those nights. I sent her screenshots of the timestamps, the still footage from the camera where he walked in and stood by her crib. She didn't reply right away, but later that evening she sent back, "That's really strange. I don't know why he'd say that. I'll talk to him." That night, Ryan came home acting cold, barely spoke during dinner. Then, after we put Ellie down, he asked, "Why are you trying to turn my family against me?" I asked him what he meant, and he said Megan called, said I was accusing him of lying, so I told him exactly what I'd seen, how I had video proof, how the monitor never detected crying, and how he kept repeating the same story to make me look negligent. His response? He laughed, not a normal laugh, a sharp, bitter one. Then he said, "You really need to talk to someone. You're obsessing over this." I lost it. I told him I wasn't crazy, that this wasn't about me being paranoid. This was about him making up things that never happened. I said, "Do you understand how messed up that is? Making me think I'm failing as a mom just to make yourself look better?" He didn't answer. Just stood there with that infuriating blank expression, like I was beneath reasoning with. Then he said something I'll never forget. "If you're this defensive, maybe it's because you know you're slipping." That broke something in me. The next day, I packed up Ellie and went to stay with my mom. I told Ryan I needed space, that I wasn't comfortable being in the same house when I couldn't trust him. He called me dramatic, said I was blowing everything out of proportion, but didn't try to stop me. At my mom's for the first time in months, I slept. Like actually slept, no second-guessing the monitor, no wondering if I'd wake up to accusations. Just peace. Over the next few days I started putting pieces together. This wasn't new, it was just the first time I caught it. Ryan had always had this habit of rewriting small details, saying he'd done things he hadn't, exaggerating how much effort he put in, twisting stories to sound more favorable. It used to be small, like claiming he'd cleaned something I'd already done, or reminding me of a conversation we'd never had. I used to laugh it off, chalk it up to forgetfulness. Now I realize it was control, a slow erosion of my confidence. Disguised as helpfulness, he texted a few times, trying to act like everything was normal. "How's Ellie doing? You'll come home soon, right? We should talk about getting help, maybe therapy for you." That last one made me see red. "Therapy for me," I finally replied. "I've been keeping records of everything. You've been lying, and I know it. I'm not coming back until you get help." He didn't reply for 3 days. Then he sent one last message. "If you're going to make me out to be the bad guy, go ahead. I've done nothing wrong." I showed my mom everything, the messages, the video clips, the monitor data. She was livid. She said it sounded like he was trying to gaslight me into doubting myself, maybe to make me more dependent on him. And honestly, I believe that now I've talked to a therapist since then, and she said this pattern, making me think I'm forgetting or imagining things, is a common emotional manipulation tactic. It chips away at your sense of reality. I'm filing for legal separation next week. It's not something I ever imagined doing, but the idea of raising Ellie in an environment where truth is optional makes my stomach turn. Ryan's tried reaching out again, but I'm done engaging. The monitor footage, the texts, the evidence, it's all saved. What he doesn't realize is that while he was trying to convince me I was crazy, he left behind digital proof that he was the one rewriting reality. I don't know what his endgame was. Maybe control, maybe insecurity, but I know one thing for sure. I won't let my daughter grow up thinking that's what love looks like. For the first time in months, I feel steady, not angry, not anxious, just clear. It's strange, isn't it? How someone can spend so long trying to make you doubt yourself that the moment you finally see the truth, it feels like waking up after a long nightmare. And this time, when I wake in the night to Ellie's little noises, I know exactly what's real. Final update: it's been almost 6 months since I left Ryan. And honestly, it feels like 6 years. There's something strange about how time moves after a relationship like that. When you finally step out of the fog, you start realizing just how long you've been breathing smoke. The first month after moving to my mom's house was survival mode. I wasn't sleeping well, even though I was away from him. Every time Ellie stirred in the night, I jolted awake, my heart pounding, expecting to see Ryan standing over her crib, or worse, standing in the doorway telling me she'd been crying for hours again. It took weeks before I stopped checking the monitor every 5 minutes. My mom, Karen, was incredible. She didn't hover or question me too much. She'd just bring me tea, take Ellie for a walk when she saw me about to fall apart, and quietly say things like, "You're doing great. Sweetheart, Even when I clearly wasn't, I started therapy right away. The first session was brutal. My therapist, Dr. Lawson, didn't ask what Ryan did. She asked how he made me feel. And the moment she said that, I broke down. Because that was the thing. I didn't even have one clear memory of him screaming or calling me names or doing something overtly monstrous. It was all little things. Subtle, quiet manipulations that accumulated until I didn't trust my own instincts anymore. Gaslighting, she called it. Classic, deliberate, and corrosive. I'd spent so much time trying to prove I wasn't crazy that I hadn't realized he'd wanted me to question myself. Every doubt, every maybe I'm overreacting moment. That was exactly where he wanted me. Once I started untangling that, I began to feel free again. Ryan and I went through the legal separation without too much drama. He didn't contest custody at first, probably because he knew I had evidence, and because I'd already started consulting with a lawyer. But the tension ramped up when his parents got involved. His mom, Diane, called me one evening, out of the blue. She said, "Ryan told us you've been struggling mentally, and that he's worried about Ellie being in that environment." I almost laughed. Struggling mentally? Of course I was. You would too if your husband spent months making you doubt your own memories. But what made my blood boil was that he was still trying to twist the story, still trying to make me look unstable, so I sent her copies of the same monitor data, screenshots, and messages I'd given my lawyer. She didn't reply for 2 days. When she finally did, she said, "I think we need to stay out of this. I didn't know it was that serious." That silence said it all. Ryan's communication after that became sporadic. A few emails, some about finances, others about his right to see Ellie. I told him that any visitation would be supervised until the court finalized everything, and that all communication needed to go through lawyers. He hated that. He said I was weaponizing the legal system. I said I was protecting my child. About a month ago, he showed up at my mom's house unannounced. I was in the backyard with Ellie, watering plants. When I saw his car pull into the driveway, my heart jumped into my throat. He walked up slowly, hands raised like he wanted to show he wasn't there to fight. He said, "Can we talk?" My mom came out the moment she heard his voice. She told him to stay by the gate. He didn't argue. He looked at me and said, "I just wanted to apologize. I don't know why I did what I did. I think I was just overwhelmed and I didn't realize how much I was hurting you." I didn't say anything at first, because what do you even say to that? I finally told him, "You didn't just hurt me, Ryan. You tried to rewrite my reality. You made me doubt whether I was a good mother. You made me afraid of myself. That's not something an apology fixes," he nodded. Like he expected that. He looked genuinely remorseful for a moment. But I couldn't tell if it was guilt or just shame that he'd been caught. He said he was starting therapy. I told him I was glad because he needs it. Then he said something that made my stomach twist. "I kept saying she cried because I wanted to prove you weren't paying attention. I thought you were so focused on being perfect that you didn't see how checked out you were." It was twisted, but in his mind, it made sense. He wanted to break me just enough that I'd turn back toward him for reassurance, like he was trying to create the chaos only he could fix. I told him flatly that he wouldn't be seeing Ellie until a court-ordered visitation plan was in place. He didn't argue, just nodded, got back in his car and drove off. I watched him go, feeling nothing, no anger, no fear, no longing, just peace. After that, I focused on building a real life for Ellie and me. I found a small apartment about 15 minutes from my mom's house. It's nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, and a balcony that overlooks a row of maple trees. But it's ours. I painted Ellie's nursery a pale lavender and hung tiny paper stars from the ceiling. The first night we slept there, I didn't even turn on the baby monitor. I just kept her crib next to my bed, listening to her soft breaths. Realizing how far we'd come, I went back to work part-time. My co-workers, especially Lydia, my friend from HR, were amazing. They knew bits and pieces of what happened, but never pried. They just let me be human again, not the woman going through a separation. Last weekend, we had a small gathering at my place. Just my mom, Lydia, and her husband. We grilled food on the tiny balcony, and for the first time I laughed, really laughed. The kind that bubbles up from somewhere deep at one point. I looked at Ellie sitting in her little bouncer, babbling at the plants, and I felt this overwhelming sense of gratitude. Not for what happened, but for what it taught me. I used to think being a good partner meant compromise, patience, forgiveness. Now I know it also means boundaries. It means protecting your peace, even from someone you once loved. Ryan still sends the occasional email. He's been calm lately. Mostly updates about his therapy sessions or short messages asking about Ellie's milestones. I don't respond often, just factual replies. The court will finalize visitation next month. I'm okay with that. I want Ellie to have a father, just not one who lives in delusion. The other night, as I put Ellie down, she smiled up at me, grabbed my finger, and fell asleep like that. I sat there for a while, just watching her tiny chest rise and fall, and I realized I'm not angry anymore. The fury, the confusion, the paranoia, it's all faded. In its place is something quieter but stronger. Certainty. I know who I am again. I know what's real. I deleted the footage from the monitor yesterday. Not because I want to forget, but because I don't need proof anymore. I lived it, survived it, and moved past it. Ryan once said I was sleeping through the important moments. Maybe I was, but not in the way he thought. I was sleeping through a life where I constantly had to prove myself to someone who wanted me small. Now I'm awake, and every morning I wake up to Ellie's little coos, sunlight pouring into our new home, and the sound of peace. The kind I fought hard for. That's what real reality feels like. Stories number 8. When saying no to one weekend cost me my college tuition, I never thought one simple no could change my entire relationship with my parents. But that's exactly what happened. I'm 21 and a senior at a university in upstate New York. My parents, Steve and Caroline, are well off, not rich, but comfortable. My dad works in finance, and my mom owns a small interior design business. They've always liked showing off how supportive they are, but only when it fits their image. When I graduated high school, we made a deal. They'd pay for half my tuition, and I'd cover the other half with scholarships, financial aid, and a part-time job. It was fair, and for the first 3 years, it worked out fine. I kept my GPA high, worked 20 hours a week at the campus cafe, and even managed to save a little for grad school. Then came the weekend that blew it all up, the US Open. My parents are huge tennis fans. They go every year and treat it like a family event. I used to love going too when I was younger, but the older I got, the more it turned into a social thing for them. They don't really watch the matches anymore. They just drink, take selfies with other couples, and brag about their seats. This year they invited me again, but it was the same weekend as a major research symposium I'd been preparing for all semester. It wasn't mandatory, but it was a big deal for my program. Professors and grad schools attend, and it's the kind of thing that helps you stand out later. I told my parents I couldn't go, that I really wanted to focus on the symposium. At first, my mom sounded understanding. She said, "Oh honey, of course we'll miss you, but do what you need to do." 2 days later, everything changed. I got a call from my dad while I was in the library. He sounded calm but clipped. He said, "Your mother and I talked, and we've decided that if you can't make time for family, we're not going to keep paying for half your tuition. You've made your priorities clear." I thought he was joking. I actually laughed at first, but he wasn't. He said it wasn't about the money. It was about principle, he told me. "We've supported you all this way, but family comes first. If you can't show up for us, we're not going to keep funding your independence." I didn't even know what to say. I hung up, sat there staring at my notes, and felt this wave of anger and panic all at once. My tuition bill was due in 3 weeks. I tried calling my mom, hoping she'd talk some sense into him. But she doubled down. She said, "You're becoming so cold lately. Your dad feels like you don't value us anymore. We do everything for you. Everything." I was the one working every weekend, paying for my own car, groceries, and textbooks. Their everything was tuition, something we agreed on together. That night, I called Ryan, my boyfriend, and completely broke down. He came over with takeout and just let me cry it out. He's seen how my parents are, all about appearances, all about control. And he said, "They're not mad you missed a game. They're mad you said no." That line stuck with me. Over the next week, I scrambled to figure out what to do. I met with financial aid, explained the situation, and ended up applying for an emergency student loan. It wasn't ideal, but it kept me enrolled. I also picked up extra shifts at the cafe and started tutoring freshmen for a little side income. My parents didn't reach out again after that call. Not once, not even when the symposium went great. I got selected for a regional presentation, which was a huge honor. And when I texted them about it, all I got back was, "Glad to hear you're busy." A month later, they posted pictures from the Open. All smiles, champagne in hand. Captions like, "Family time is the best time." I wasn't even tagged. My mom used an old picture of me from last year's event and cropped it so it looked like I was there. That one hurt more than I expected. I tried to talk to my younger brother, Luke, about it. He's 18 and a freshman at another university, he said. They're still pissed, but I think they'll get over it, I told him. I hope so, but deep down I knew better. They weren't mad. They were punishing me. Winter break came and I didn't go home. I told them I had to work, which was half true. I just didn't want to sit at the dinner table pretending everything was fine. My mom texted me on Christmas Eve. We hope you're finding joy in your independence. My dad sent a thumbs up emoji. Ryan's family invited me over instead. His parents, Kathy and Mark, made me feel more at home in one night than my own family had in years. His mom even slipped me an envelope with a little money and said, "For books next semester, don't argue." I almost cried. Fast forward to now, my final semester. I managed to keep my grades up and secured a graduate assistantship for next year. I'll be moving to Boston this summer, and I'll finally be able to afford it without relying on my parents. Last week, my mom called out of nowhere. She started off by saying, "Your dad and I have been thinking, we'd like to start helping with your expenses again." I said, "You mean now that I'm almost done paying everything myself?" She sighed. "We just don't want bad blood." I told her it's not bad blood. It's clarity. And I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. She tried to guilt-trip me one last time, saying, "You know, we did this to teach you a lesson," I said. "Yeah, you did. And it worked." Then I hung up. I used to think being independent meant being ungrateful. Now I know it just means refusing to let people use money to control you. The irony? They probably think they taught me responsibility. But what they really did was teach me exactly how not to treat people you love. And for that, I guess I should thank them. It's been about 6 months since I wrote that first post, and honestly, everything's changed. For the better mostly. I'm in Boston now, starting my graduate program in public policy, and I can finally say this without hesitation. I'm proud of where I am, and how I got here. Moving out here was rough at first. I couldn't afford to live near campus, so I found a small apartment in Somerville with 2 roommates. It's old, drafty, and the floors creak like someone's following you at night, but it's mine. I pay rent with a mix of my grad stipend and the tutoring job I kept through Zoom. Ryan helped me move in, drove the U-Haul, and set up my desk before heading back to New York for his own job. The first few weeks, I kept waiting for my parents to reach out. Maybe a congrats or, "We're proud of you." Nothing. The silence used to sting, but now it just feels like background noise. They don't ask, I don't tell, it's peaceful in a weird way. In September, my mom finally texted, out of nowhere. It said, "Your father and I are coming to Boston for the Open. Would love to see you if you're free." The irony of that almost made me laugh. The US Open. Again, I didn't respond right away. I called Ryan and he said, "You don't owe them your time, but if you want to meet, do it on your terms." So I thought about it. I didn't want to meet in some fancy restaurant where they could play Family Reunion for their social media followers. I suggested a coffee shop near campus instead. My mom agreed, and a few days later they showed up. It was tense. My dad looked older than I remembered, but still carried himself like he was in charge of something. My mom was polite in that brittle way she gets when she's pretending everything's fine. We sat down, and the first thing my dad said was, "We're glad you're doing well. You seem very independent," that word again. It used to sound like a compliment, but from him, it just felt like a dig. He went on about how proud they were that I managed to handle things on my own. As if that had been their plan all along, my mom nodded, smiling too tightly. When I mentioned that I was paying rent, managing tuition, and budgeting everything myself, she said, "We'll see. We knew you'd figure it out. We just needed to give you a little push." A push? More like pulling the rug out from under me. But I didn't argue. I just said, "Yeah, I figured it out." They talked about their trip, the tournament, their new friends, all surface-level stuff. Then my mom asked if Ryan and I were still together. I said yes, and she said, "Oh, that's nice. I hope he's not distracting you from your studies." I smiled and said, "He's the reason I'm still here." My dad looked away, pretending to check his watch. We wrapped up soon after. No hugs, just awkward half-smiles. My mom asked for a picture, for the memories, and I said I wasn't really in the mood. She looked surprised, almost offended, but didn't push it. They left saying, "Let's stay in touch." I haven't heard from them since. A week later, I got a call from my brother. "Luke," he said, "Mom was crying after seeing you. She said she didn't recognize you anymore," I told him. "That's because she only knew the version she could control." He didn't say anything for a long time, then said quietly, "Yeah, I get it now. Turns out, my parents have started pulling similar stuff with him. He joined a fraternity and decided to stay on campus for Thanksgiving instead of coming home. And my dad flipped. He told Luke he was turning into his sister. When Luke told me that, I felt this mix of anger and sadness. It wasn't just me. They're doing it again. Just to someone new, I told him, "You don't have to repeat this cycle. You can love them without letting them run your life," he said. "I'm trying." Meanwhile, things between Ryan and me are stronger than ever. His parents still check in on me like I'm part of the family. Kathy mailed me a care package before midterms. Snacks, socks, even a handwritten note that said, "You're doing great. Don't forget to eat real meals." It sounds small, but it meant everything. Sometimes I think about the life I would have had if my parents hadn't pulled their stunt. Maybe I'd still be depending on them, still worrying about keeping them happy. But I wouldn't trade where I am now. I feel like I've grown into someone I actually respect. There's this one moment that sums it up. Last week, I was walking home from class, and it was freezing out. My fingers were numb, and I was dead tired from a 12-hour day. But I passed a cafe window, saw my reflection, and just stopped. I looked steady. Not happy exactly, but sure of myself. Like I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval anymore. I went home, made a cheap dinner, and paid my rent early. And I thought, this is what peace feels like. Maybe my parents think I owe them gratitude for teaching me a lesson. But if anything, the lesson was theirs. Love doesn't work like leverage. You can't withdraw affection to prove a point and expect things to stay the same. I still hope one day they'll get it. That family doesn't mean blind loyalty or keeping score. But I've stopped waiting for them to understand. Because I finally do. It's been over a year now, and this will probably be my last update. Writing that first post feels like a lifetime ago, like it happened to someone else. Back then, I was still trying to make sense of everything. The hurt, the silence, the weird guilt that came with choosing myself. Now it's different. The anger's gone. The sadness is quieter. What's left is clarity. Graduating from my master's program last month was the biggest moment of my life. I walked across that stage knowing every bill, every credit, every late night was on me. No safety net, no conditions. I earned it. When they called my name, I heard Ryan cheering louder than anyone else in the crowd. His parents were there too, holding signs like I was part of their family. Because by now my own parents didn't come. I didn't invite them a week before the ceremony. My mom texted me out of the blue. "We saw on Facebook that you're graduating. We'd love to attend if possible." I thought about it for a long time before replying. I said, "I appreciate the thought, but this day is for the people who were there when things got hard." She wrote back, "We made mistakes, but we're still your family." I didn't respond. It's taken me a long time to understand that being family doesn't mean you're automatically entitled to someone's space. It's about showing up when it matters, not when it looks good on Instagram. They wanted to reappear for the highlight reel, but not for the parts where I was struggling to keep it together. The funny thing is, I'm not bitter about it anymore. I used to replay the moment they cut me off and wonder what I could have said differently. Now, I see it for what it was, the start of my independence, not the end of our relationship. They shut the door, but they didn't realize I had another way out. After graduation, I got offered a full-time position with the policy research firm I interned for last summer. It's not glamorous, but it's the kind of work I've always wanted to do. Real, tangible impact stuff. I moved into a new apartment, still small but sunny, with a view of the Charles River if you lean out the window far enough. Ryan and I are still together. He moved here too, and we've talked seriously about the future. Marriage, maybe a place of our own in a year or two. His parents treat me like a daughter already. They came to my graduation dinner, and at one point, his mom raised her glass and said, "To doing it your way? Even when it's hard." I nearly cried at the table. Luke, my brother, has been slowly drifting my way too. He's in his sophomore year now, and after seeing how my parents reacted to him spending spring break with friends instead of coming home, he finally said he's done walking on eggshells. We talk every week. I try to be the kind of support I wish I'd had. He told me something recently that stuck with me. He said, "They still talk about you like you're in a phase. Like you'll come around someday." And maybe that's what they tell themselves to make it easier. But the truth is, I already came around, just not to them. I came around to myself. A few weeks ago, I got a letter from my dad. Not an email or a text. An actual handwritten letter. It was short and awkward, but sincere in its own way. He wrote, "I don't know how to fix this, but I'd like to try." I didn't reply right away. For a long time I stared at it and tried to figure out how I felt. Part of me wanted to tear it up. Another part wanted to call him. In the end, I decided to write back. But carefully, I told him I appreciated the letter, that I'd be open to talking. But only if the goal was understanding. Not control, I said. If we're going to rebuild something, it has to be real this time. He hasn't responded yet. I'm okay either way. The last year taught me that healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it's just acceptance. Realizing you can love someone and still keep your distance. My parents might never see me the way I wish they would, but that doesn't mean I have to keep proving my worth. A few nights ago, I went out for a walk by the river after work. It was cold, the kind of Boston chill that cuts through every layer. But as I stood there watching the lights reflect on the water, I thought about how far I'd come since that first phone call. The one where my dad told me I'd made my priorities clear. He was right. In a way, I did make them clear. I just didn't realize it then. I chose my future over their expectations, my peace over their approval, my own definition of family, and if I could go back, I'd still say no to the US Open every single time. Stories number 9. I put my roommate's dirty dishes and trash in a plastic bag and left it by her door. I, 23F, live in a 2-bedroom apartment with my roommate, Chelsea, 25F, who I met through a Facebook housing group last year. On paper, she seemed perfect. Same general schedule, similar lifestyle, even similar music taste, but living with her turned out to be a whole different story. I've had roommates before, and I've learned that the difference between peace and chaos is simple: cleaning habits. And Chelsea? She's the human embodiment of a before photo. When we first moved in, everything was fine. We both agreed to split chores evenly, alternating things like taking out the trash, wiping down counters, and doing dishes. For the first month, she held up her end. But slowly, like a frog boiling in water, she just stopped. It started with a few dishes in the sink. Then the dishes became towers. Then the towers turned into what I can only describe as biological experiments. I tried to ignore it, but it was hard when the smell started greeting me at the door. The real breaking point came when she went away for a weekend trip to see her boyfriend. And I noticed the sink was filled with half-eaten ramen, spoiled milk, and old coffee mugs. I texted her saying, "Hey, can you please wash your dishes when you get back? The kitchen's kind of unusable," she replied. "Sure thing. I'll handle it when I'm home Monday." She didn't. Monday came, Tuesday came. By Thursday, she was home, sitting on the couch, watching Netflix while her dishes were still rotting in the sink. When I brought it up again, she groaned. "I've been working all week. I'll do it this weekend." She didn't do it that weekend either. I finally snapped when I went to make breakfast one morning and found ants swarming the counter. I screamed, grabbed cleaning spray, and started wiping everything down while she was still asleep. I was angry, like physically shaking angry, because I pay the same rent she does, and I shouldn't have to live in a pigsty because she's lazy. Later that day, I decided to talk to her calmly. I said, "Hey, can we come up with a system to keep the kitchen clean? Maybe a cleaning schedule?" She looked annoyed and said, "You're being kind of uptight. Just relax. It's not that serious. That's the thing. People who don't clean always say it's not serious, because they're not the ones living in the mess." I tried for another week to give her a chance to step up. She didn't. Every time I'd clean the kitchen, she'd mess it up again. She'd leave her cereal bowl on the table, throw takeout containers near the trash can, not in it. And once, she left half a burrito in the fridge until it turned gray. I couldn't take it anymore, so one night, after coming home from work and seeing the sink overflowing yet again, I did something I'll admit was petty, but honestly, it felt necessary. I grabbed a pair of gloves, a giant trash bag, and went to work. I put every single dirty dish, takeout box, and piece of trash that was hers into that bag. I tied it shut and set it neatly right in front of her bedroom door. I didn't say a word. The next morning, she came storming out of her room holding the bag like it was radioactive. "What the hell is this?" she demanded. I said as calmly as I could, "That's your stuff. I couldn't use the kitchen anymore, so I cleaned it. I figured you'd want your things back." She looked absolutely furious. "You went through my stuff!" she shouted. I said, "It's not your stuff. It's garbage and dirty dishes that have been in the kitchen for 2 weeks. She said I was crossing a line and trying to make her look bad. I told her, "Chelsea, I didn't have to make you look bad. You did that yourself." She stomped off to her room and slammed the door. About an hour later, I heard her furiously washing dishes. For the next 2 days, she barely spoke to me, which honestly was a blessing, but then things got even more awkward. She texted me while I was at work saying, "You owe me an apology. You embarrassed me and disrespected my space," I replied. "You disrespected our shared space by refusing to clean it." "I just contained your mess." She didn't respond. That night, she gave me the silent treatment, slamming cabinets every time I walked into the kitchen. Then she started leaving passive-aggressive notes on the fridge, stuff like, "Remember, roommates are supposed to communicate, not retaliate," or "Please don't touch things that don't belong to you." It would have been funny if it weren't so exhausting. A week later, I invited a couple friends over for dinner, and she made a big scene about how she wasn't comfortable having people over because she felt unsafe after what I did. My friends were polite but clearly confused when they saw how spotless the apartment was. After they left, I told her, "Look, I don't want to fight with you. I just want a clean space," she said. "Then clean your half," I said. "That's not how shared spaces work." She rolled her eyes and said, "You should have just reminded me instead of doing something dramatic." I stared at her and said, "Chelsea, I reminded you 6 times. She didn't have anything to say after that. Now she's barely around. She stays over at her boyfriend's most nights, and honestly, I'm fine with that. The apartment stays clean, the dishes are done, and I can actually cook without fighting off insects. A few of our mutual friends think I went too far. They said I could have just kept cleaning, because some people are messy. But I think that's the problem. People keep excusing laziness as a personality trait. I work long hours, too. I don't have time to play maid just because she's lazy and doesn't notice mess. I don't think I did anything cruel. I didn't throw her stuff out or yell or publicly embarrass her. I just gave her a very clear message. If you make the mess, you deal with it. Was it petty? Sure, but was it also fair? Absolutely. And honestly, if that's what it took for her to finally wash a plate, then I think I did both of us a favor. Update. It's been about 2 months since the trash bag incident, and somehow, the tension in the apartment managed to evolve from silent hostility to a kind of cold, sarcastic coexistence. I didn't expect things to be warm and fuzzy after that blow-up, but I also didn't expect it to feel like walking on glass in my own home. For the first couple of weeks, Chelsea avoided me completely. She'd time her trips to the kitchen so they didn't overlap with mine. I'd hear her door open the second my bedroom light went off. She even started keeping a mini fridge in her room, which I didn't realize until I saw her carrying groceries down the hall like a squirrel hoarding nuts. It was weird, but I wasn't about to start another argument. But the weirdest part? The apartment was spotless, not just not dirty. I mean spotless. She started wiping down counters obsessively, vacuuming twice a week, and even putting little sticky notes on containers in the fridge like, "Please finish leftovers by Friday." At first, I thought maybe she was trying to prove a point, that she could be the better roommate. But then I realized she was just overcompensating. One night, I caught her scrubbing the sink at 11 p.m., muttering under her breath about not giving anyone a reason to complain again. It actually made me feel a little bad. A few days later, I decided to try to talk things out. I knocked on her door and said, "Hey, can we chat?" She didn't answer at first, but after a pause, she opened the door a crack and said, "What?" "I just want to clear the air," I said. "I know things have been tense. I didn't mean to make you feel disrespected. I just needed the kitchen to not look like a landfill." She looked at me for a second and sighed. "I get it. But it really hurt that you touched my stuff," I said. "I get that too. But when it's been sitting in the sink for 3 weeks, it stops being your stuff and starts being a biohazard." She actually laughed at that. Just a little. But it was something. We talked for a while, and it was awkward, but not terrible. She admitted that she'd been struggling with time management and stress. Apparently, her job had been a lot more demanding than she let on, and she felt overwhelmed all the time. I told her I understood, but being overwhelmed doesn't give you the right to live like a raccoon in shared spaces. We kind of left it at that, no apologies, no hugging it out, just an understanding that we'd both try to do better. For about 3 weeks, things were actually decent. We cooked at the same time sometimes. She even made me pancakes one morning out of nowhere, which felt like her version of a peace offering. But of course, peace never lasts. Her boyfriend, Ethan, started coming over constantly. He's the kind of guy who wears shoes inside, eats snacks straight from the bag, and somehow leaves crumbs in every imaginable place. I swear he shed Doritos dust like glitter. One night, I came home to find the living room coffee table covered in beer cans and pizza boxes. Chelsea and Ethan were passed out on the couch, the TV still blaring. I cleaned it up because I didn't have the energy for a fight, But the next morning I said, "Hey, can you keep an eye on the mess when Ethan's here? I spent an hour cleaning last night." She gave me this defensive look and said, "Why are you always acting like I'm disgusting? You don't have to control everything." And just like that, we were back to square one. This time, though, I didn't lose my cool. I just stopped engaging. I kept my stuff in my room, bought my own dishes, labeled my food, and stopped trying to fix her habits. It felt petty and lonely, but it was also peaceful. Then, a week ago, something unexpected happened. The leasing office emailed both of us about renewing our lease. I hadn't decided whether I wanted to stay or find a studio, but I assumed we'd at least talk about it. Instead, I came home to find Chelsea packing boxes. She told me she'd found another apartment closer to work and would be moving out by the end of the month. She said it casually, like it was no big deal, but there was definitely tension in her voice. I asked, "Is this because of what happened?" She shrugged. "Partly, but I also just need a change. I think we're both too different to live together." And honestly, she's right. We managed to stay civil during her last couple of weeks here. We even joked a bit when I helped her carry boxes to her car. Before she left, she said, "For what it's worth, you made me realize how bad I was about cleaning. My new roommate's kind of strict, so maybe I needed this," I told her. "And you made me realize that I can't control how other people live. I can only control how much of it I'm willing to tolerate." She laughed and said, "Fair trade. Now that she's gone, the apartment feels quiet, but in a good way. I don't dread walking into the kitchen anymore. I light candles, cook full meals, and eat without side-eyeing the sink. It's weirdly peaceful. Sometimes I feel a little bad about how everything went down. Maybe I could have been more patient. Maybe she could have been more responsible, but in the end, it was just two people who weren't compatible as roommates. And that's okay. I'm already looking for a new roommate, but this time I'm being way more careful. Cleaning habits are now the first topic of conversation. If they even joke about being a little messy, I'm running the other way. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that sharing a space with someone means respecting it, and the people in it. And if they can't do that, no amount of polite reminders or trash bags will fix it. Final update: it's been almost a full year since the whole trash bag at the door drama. And honestly, I've had enough distance from it now to actually laugh. At the time, it felt like the most stressful thing in the world. Like my entire home life had turned into some weird silent war over who could out-petty the other. But now that I'm living in a completely different space, I can finally see how much that experience changed me, for better and worse. After Chelsea moved out, I stayed in that apartment for another 6 months. I ended up finding a new roommate, Lauren, 26F, through a coworker who swore she was super tidy and chill. And thank God, she was. From day one, Lauren and I clicked. We actually set up a cleaning schedule that stuck, split the bills fairly, and even decorated the place together. I didn't realize how much I'd been holding my breath until I could walk into my kitchen without mentally preparing for disaster. But before I found her, I had about a month of living alone. Just me and the echo of Chelsea's ghost in that spotless kitchen. At first, it was lonely. There was this weird emptiness to the place, like all the noise and chaos had been vacuumed out. But it was also peaceful. I could come home from work, cook dinner, light a candle, and not have to worry about finding crusty dishes in the sink or half-eaten burritos in the fridge. During that time, I actually heard from Chelsea again. Out of nowhere, she texted me one evening saying, "Hey, I just wanted to say thanks. I didn't appreciate what you did before, but I get it now." Apparently, her new roommate had given her a gentle intervention after she started slipping into her old habits, leaving cups around, forgetting to take out trash, that kind of thing. She said it reminded her of our fight. Except this time she didn't wait for it to blow up. She actually changed her habits before it turned into a problem. She said, "I didn't realize how bad it had gotten until I wasn't living with you anymore. You kind of shocked me into being an adult." That message hit harder than I expected. I didn't reply right away. I just stared at it for a while, remembering how furious I'd been that night, scrubbing out her dishes and stuffing her garbage into that plastic bag. I wasn't trying to teach her a lesson then. I just felt trapped. But hearing her say she'd learned something from it, well, it made all that tension feel a little more worthwhile. I eventually texted back, "I'm glad things are better now." "I never meant to make you feel bad. I just needed to breathe again," she replied. "No hard feelings, you were right, and that was that." We didn't become friends again or start hanging out, but it was a clean ending. No resentment, no drama. Just two people who weren't compatible roommates, but maybe helped each other grow up a little. Living with Lauren has honestly been like night and day. We've had our moments, sure, like when she left the oven on once or accidentally used my expensive coffee, but they're normal roommate hiccups, not emotional warfare. We communicate, we clean, we respect each other's space. I didn't realize how much emotional energy bad living situations drain from you until I finally had peace again. A few months ago, I even ran into Chelsea in person. I was at Target picking up cleaning supplies, ironically enough, and she was there with her boyfriend. She looked genuinely happy, different. In a good way. We caught up for a few minutes, and she told me she'd started a new job at a marketing firm downtown. She laughed and said, "You'd be proud. I actually have a cleaning schedule now," I joked. "Do you put your dishes in plastic bags when they pile up?" She cracked up and said, "No, but I think about that night every time I see a full sink." It was a small, funny, oddly healing moment. That whole experience made me realize that being a good roommate, or honestly, just a good adult, has nothing to do with perfection. It's about accountability. You can make messes, but you have to own them. And if someone calls you out on your behavior, the right response isn't to get defensive. It's to ask yourself why they had to in the first place. For me, it was also a lesson in boundaries. I used to think being nice meant tolerating things that bothered me, that if I kept cleaning quietly or hinting politely, the other person would eventually take the hint. But that's not how people work. Sometimes you have to be direct, and sometimes being direct makes you look like the bad guy. But it's still the right move. Now, when I think back to the version of me who was shaking with anger, standing in front of that sink full of filth, I don't judge her. She wasn't mean or controlling. She was just exhausted and unheard. I think a lot of people who've had bad roommates would get that feeling instantly. It's the kind of helpless frustration that slowly eats at you until you snap. If I could go back, I might handle it differently. Maybe talk one more time before resorting to the trash bag. But at the same time, that moment forced both of us to wake up. For me, it meant learning how to stand up for my comfort. For Chelsea, it meant finally facing how her behavior affected others. Now, a year later, we're both doing fine. No resentment. No lingering awkwardness. Just a bizarre chapter that taught me more about adulthood than any self-help book ever could. And every time I take out the trash now, I can't help but smirk. Because no matter what else, that plastic bag absolutely got the job done. Tori's number 10. He told me I had a low pain tolerance while I was screaming in a doctor's office. I'm still shaking as I write this, because I can't stop replaying it in my head. The sterile smell of the room, the sound of metal instruments clinking, the fake calmness in the doctor's voice as I clutched the table with white knuckles and tried not to scream. But I did scream, and he looked down at me like I was the problem. I went in yesterday to get an IUD inserted. I'm 28, never had kids, and after years of trying different forms of birth control that either wrecked my hormones or gave me migraines, my OB/GYN suggested an IUD as a simple and quick solution. He said it would be a little uncomfortable, maybe some cramping, but over in minutes. That Dr. Keller, has been my gynecologist for 3 years. He's always been polite, a bit brisk, but never unkind. I trusted him. I didn't question what he told me, because he's the professional. I wish I'd known better when I got to the clinic. The nurse, Ashley, was warm and reassuring. She told me it would be quick, said I'd feel some pinching and pressure. She handed me a paper gown, left me to change, and I tried to calm my nerves. I was nervous but not terrified. I've had painful cramps, tattoos, even a biopsy once. I figured I could handle whatever pinching meant. When Dr. Keller came in, he didn't really check in. No small talk. No, how are you feeling? Just business. All right, we'll get this done quickly. You'll feel a little pressure, he said, snapping on his gloves. The nurse asked if I wanted her to hold my hand. I said no at first, trying to be tough, but God, I wish I'd said yes. He started the procedure, and I immediately felt pain, not discomfort. Not pressure, pain. It was sharp, deep, like someone stabbing me from the inside out. I gasped, and he said, "You're doing fine." Then, as he adjusted something, I don't even know what, I felt this wave of pain so intense it made my vision blur. I screamed. I didn't mean to. It just came out of me. I grabbed the sides of the table, tears spilling out. And I said, "Please, please stop. I can't." He didn't stop. He said in this calm, almost annoyed tone, "It's okay. You just have a low pain tolerance. We're almost done." Low pain tolerance, like I was some overdramatic child overreacting to a stubbed toe. I couldn't breathe. The nurse looked uncomfortable, like she wanted to say something but didn't. She just told me to take deep breaths. I screamed again when he inserted the IUD itself. It felt like someone scraping my insides with a blade. And then it was done. He stepped back, peeled off his gloves, and said, "All set? You'll have some cramping for a few hours." I lay there shaking. My legs were trembling so badly that I couldn't even sit up at first. He handed me a pad and said, "Just relax a minute." Then started typing on his computer like nothing happened. Ashley handed me tissues, whispering, "You did great." But I could tell she was trying not to look me in the eye. When I finally sat up, I asked, "Was it supposed to hurt that much?" Dr. Keller didn't even look up. "Everyone's different," he said. "Some women tolerate it better than others. You just have a lower threshold, that's all. That was it. No apology, no explanation, no offer of a painkiller, no mention of why it felt like torture. Just dismissal." I left that office humiliated. I cried in my car for 20 minutes before I could even drive. My entire body was shaking, and my lower abdomen throbbed with pain. When I got home, I curled up on the couch and sobbed until I fell asleep. Later that night, I Googled IUD insertion pain. I fell down a rabbit hole of women describing the same thing. How their doctors brushed it off. How they were told, "It's not that bad." How no one offered anesthesia or even a numbing agent. One comment said, "They say it's not that bad because they've never experienced it." That hit me like a truck. Because of course, the people telling us it's mild discomfort aren't the ones lying on the table. I started reading more and learned that some doctors use local anesthesia or medication to soften the cervix, especially for people who haven't had kids. Mine didn't offer anything, not even ibuprofen, nothing. It wasn't until later that night, when I told my best friend Lena, that I realized how angry I actually was. She's a nurse. When I told her what happened, she was furious. "He said what to you?" she shouted. "Low pain tolerance? Are you kidding?" "That's medical gaslighting, straight up." She explained that IUD insertion for someone who's never given birth can be excruciating. She said my reaction wasn't weak, it was normal. That some people faint or vomit from the pain, and doctors still downplay it because women exaggerate. That made me feel sick. Because I trusted that man, I trusted the system that said I'd be taken care of. Today, I called the clinic. I asked to speak to the office manager, Beth, and told her exactly what happened. To her credit, she was apologetic. She said she'd look into it, and that my feedback was important. But it felt hollow, like she was reading from a script. Then, this afternoon, I got a message from the clinic portal, a note from Dr. Keller himself. It said, "Patient tolerated procedure well. Mild discomfort noted. Advised rest and monitoring for cramping." I almost threw my phone. Mild discomfort. That's what he wrote after I screamed so loudly the nurse flinched. After I begged him to stop. After he called me weak for feeling pain so unbearable I thought I might pass out. I've been thinking about filing a complaint. Lena thinks I should. My mom thinks I should find a new doctor and move on. But I can't shake the rage. It's not just about me. It's about how normalized this is. How many women have sat in that same chair, gritting their teeth, being told they were overreacting while someone hurt them in the name of medicine? I feel violated, not sexually, but emotionally. I feel dismissed, minimized, and stripped of dignity. And I keep thinking about that moment, his voice calm, bored even, as I cried out in pain, telling me I just had a low pain tolerance. No. What I had was a doctor who didn't care enough to make it bearable. I don't know what I'll do next. Maybe I'll report him. Maybe I'll write to the medical board. Maybe I'll find a new OB and tell every woman I know to ask questions before trusting that it won't hurt much, because it did. It hurt like hell, and the worst part wasn't the pain. It was being told it wasn't real. Update: it's been a few days since I wrote everything down, and I'm still reeling, but now the anger is sharper, more focused. Yesterday, I went back to the clinic, not for another procedure, but to demand answers. I wanted accountability. Not a shrug and a "you just have a low pain tolerance" excuse. I asked to speak to Beth, the office manager, in person. She led me to a small office with a bland painting of flowers on the wall. I could hear the faint hum of the reception area behind the door, nurses moving about, patients murmuring. It should have been ordinary, mundane, but to me, it felt like stepping into the arena again. I explained, as calmly as I could, what had happened. I told her how Dr. Keller made me scream, ignored my pain, dismissed me as low tolerance, and then documented it as mild discomfort. I showed her the monitor footage I'd taken afterward. Well, not footage, but my notes, screenshots, and timestamps. She listened. Nod after nod. I understand, she said. This shouldn't have happened. I'm so sorry you had to experience that. I asked her if there would be any consequences for Dr. Keller. She hemmed and hawed. We take patient feedback seriously. We'll review the procedure. It may be a training issue. We'll see how to address it. Training issue? I asked, my voice rising slightly. You mean it's fine for a doctor to dismiss someone screaming in pain as a low pain tolerance? And that's just a mistake you can correct with a memo? She avoided my eyes. We want to make sure this doesn't happen again. I understand your frustration. I left the office feeling hollow. I hadn't expected an apology, really, but I had hoped for acknowledgement that what happened was wrong, not a shrug and some vague promise of reviewing procedure. At home, I sat with a heating pad on my abdomen and replayed everything again. The way Dr. Keller leaned over me, snapping gloves, not acknowledging my tears. The way he typed afterward like nothing happened. The way the medical record read, mild discomfort. I realized that it wasn't just about me screaming. It was about the way women's pain, our pain, is minimized, normalized, even expected to be endured silently. So I decided to go public. Not in a way that exposes identities recklessly, but to warn other women. I wrote a detailed post on a women's health forum, laying out what happened, the exact words he used, how the staff reacted, the documentation in the chart, and how it felt to be dismissed. I included tips for women getting an IUD for the first time. Ask about pain management, ask if local anesthesia is an option, bring someone to hold your hand and trust your body if it's screaming at you. Responses flooded in within hours. Women shared similar experiences, some with worse outcomes, some with fainting, panic attacks, or even needing emergency care because their pain was dismissed. Many said the same thing I felt. You are not weak. You are not overreacting. This is normal. It hit me like a wave. I wasn't alone. My reaction wasn't abnormal. I hadn't failed somehow for feeling intense pain. Later that evening, I called Lena. I needed her voice. She listened as I cried and raged simultaneously, telling her how Dr. Keller had laughed at my screams in my head, how dismissive he'd been, and how the office's response felt empty. She said, "You have every right to be furious. That wasn't just a bad experience. That was negligence and emotional abuse. Honestly, and now you're doing something about it, which is brave as hell." She suggested I consider filing a formal complaint with the state medical board. Even if it doesn't change your record, she said, it could prevent someone else from going through the same nightmare. I spent the night drafting the complaint. I included dates, times, the exact phrasing he used, the nurse's reactions, and the office's inadequate response. It felt empowering, finally putting my voice where it mattered. This morning, I sent the complaint. I attached the screenshots, my notes, and a cover letter detailing how the dismissive comment about my low pain tolerance exemplified a larger problem with patient care. Even now, a day later, I feel a mixture of relief and lingering anger. Relief because I took action, and anger because I shouldn't have had to. Because this shouldn't be normal. Because screaming during a painful procedure shouldn't be dismissed as weakness. I don't know what will happen next. Maybe Dr. Keller gets a slap on the wrist. Maybe nothing changes, but I do know this. I will never go back to that clinic. I will never let someone gaslight me about my own body. And I will keep sharing my story, because if one woman reads it and feels validated, it will have been worth it. Pain isn't weakness. Screaming isn't weakness. Trusting your own body isn't weakness. And I finally, painfully, fiercely believe that final update. It's been about 2 months since that nightmare appointment. And I feel like a different person, not in some dramatic, overnight transformation kind of way, but in the slow, steady way that comes from realizing you actually can trust yourself again. After I filed the formal complaint with the state medical board, I finally heard back from someone there, Miss Harper, an investigator assigned to my case. She asked for a detailed account, which I had already prepared, so I sent everything over. The timeline, the screenshots of messages and notes, the descriptions of what Dr. Keller said and how he treated me, even the copy of the procedure report stating mild discomfort, Ms. Harper was straightforward and supportive. She told me that the complaint would be reviewed and that the board takes patient safety seriously, especially in cases of dismissive or harmful behavior. Hearing someone acknowledge that this wasn't normal or my fault felt like the first real breath of air I'd taken in months. Meanwhile, I found a new gynecologist, Dr. Monroe, through a friend's recommendation. When I walked into her office, I braced myself for the same dismissal or brusque attitude I had gotten used to with Dr. Keller. But from the moment I met her, it was different. She explained every step of the procedures, asked about my pain concerns, and offered options for managing discomfort. She actually asked me if I wanted a local anesthetic before any minor procedures. During my follow-up appointment after the IUD insertion, Dr. Monroe checked the placement, and I felt comfortable. She noticed I was tense and said, "It's completely valid to be nervous or in pain. Nobody should make you feel ashamed of that." I almost started crying in her office. But this time, it was relief, not panic. I also started journaling every evening, documenting my experiences, feelings, and progress. It sounds small, but it's been incredible for reclaiming my narrative. Every entry is a reminder that my reactions are valid, my voice matters, and my body is mine, not something to be dismissed or judged. I've been sharing my story in forums too, anonymously, offering advice for women about to get an IUD or dealing with dismissive medical professionals. The response has been overwhelming. Messages from strangers telling me my story helped them advocate for themselves, or that it made them feel seen, make me feel like all the fear and frustration I endured wasn't in vain. Even my friend Lena has been there every step of the way. She came with me to the follow-up appointment, sat in the waiting room while I met Dr. Monroe, and reminded me that I wasn't overreacting, that I wasn't sensitive, I was human. I haven't heard from Dr. Keller since the complaint was filed, which is fine by me. Honestly, I don't want to. I don't need an apology I doubt he truly means, and I don't need someone rewriting my reality again. I've learned that sometimes the only power you have is over how you react, and over who you let into your life. The IUD is in place, and while there was cramping for a couple of days after insertion, it was manageable and nothing like that first experience. I can even laugh about it now. Mostly bitter laughter, but laughter nonetheless. The most important thing is this. I've learned to trust my instincts. If something feels wrong, it is wrong. If someone dismisses your pain or your experience, that says more about them than it does about you. And screaming during a painful procedure? That's not weakness. That's survival. That's proof you're alive and capable of feeling deeply, even when someone else wants to convince you that you're overreacting. I feel stronger, safer, and more in control than I have in years. Not because the situation changed, but because I changed. I reclaimed my narrative, my body, and my voice. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I can breathe without guilt, without fear, and without someone else trying to rewrite my reality. I still think about that day sometimes. The scream, the dismissal. But now, instead of shaking or crying, I use it as a reminder of what I endured and survived. I tell myself, you are strong, you are valid, you are not your doctor's low pain tolerance. You are yourself, and that is enough. Stories number 11. The week that turned a friendship into a transaction. I never thought I'd lose one of my closest friends over a few $100. But that's exactly what happened. I'm 28, and my friend, or I guess former friend now, is named Daniel. We've known each other since college. We met freshman year in a political science class and immediately clicked. He was the kind of guy everyone liked. Funny, easygoing, good with people. Over the years, we stayed close even after we graduated and ended up living in different states. He moved to Denver for work, and I stayed in Portland a couple of months ago. I had to fly to Denver for a week for a work conference. My company covers flights and meals, but not hotels. When I told Daniel, he said, "Just crash at my place, man. Don't waste money on a hotel." I hesitated because I didn't want to be a burden, but he insisted. "Seriously," he said, "you'll save like $1,000. I've got a guest room. It's no big deal," so I took him up on it. When I got there, things seemed fine at first. He and his girlfriend, Emily, lived in a nice apartment near downtown. She was polite, but not overly warm, which I chalked up to her not really knowing me. I bought groceries, offered to cook a couple dinners, and even brought them a bottle of whiskey as a thank you gift. By the third day, though, I started noticing a shift. Emily barely talked to me, and Daniel seemed distracted whenever we hung out. I tried to stay out of their way, mostly worked from my laptop in the guest room, and spent the evenings at conference events. On the 5th night, I came home late and heard them arguing quietly in the kitchen. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but my name came up," Emily said. "He's been here almost a week. Are we just hosting him for free?" "You know the utilities are higher, and he's been eating here," Daniel said. "He's my friend, Em. It's just a week," she said. "You're not a hotel." The next morning, things were tense. Emily barely said good morning, and Daniel seemed awkward. I felt like a freeloader even though I'd been careful not to impose. I even offered to take them out to dinner that night to say thanks. when I left at the end of the week. I thanked them both and offered to Venmo something for utilities or groceries. Daniel laughed it off and said, "Don't be stupid. You're fine." So I went home thinking everything was cool. About a week later, I got a long text from him. It said something like, "Hey man, not trying to be weird about this, but Em feels like it would be fair if you chipped in a bit for the time you stayed. Water, electricity, extra groceries, etc. I told her you offered, but she thinks it's the right thing to do." I was kind of stunned. I asked how much they were thinking, and he said, "Maybe $250? I actually laughed when I read it because $250 for a week in an apartment I barely used felt insane. I wasn't expecting a free ride. I'd already offered. But that number made no sense. I told him I'd cover half that, $125, which felt reasonable considering I cooked, cleaned, and paid for dinner one night. He said, "I think that's fair. I'll let her know." So I sent it. End of story, right? Wrong. 2 weeks later, I noticed he'd unfollowed me on Instagram. Then he stopped responding to texts. Finally, I called him, and when he picked up, he sounded cold. He said, "Look, man, it just felt weird. You acted like I was trying to squeeze money out of you when it was just about fairness. Em thinks you don't respect us," I said. "You asked for money after the fact. I offered before I left, and you said no," he said. "I didn't want to make it awkward, but you kind of took advantage." That word, advantage, made me furious. I reminded him that he invited me, that I'd tried to contribute, and that I wasn't some mooch sleeping on his couch eating his food. He said, "You don't get it, man. You're single. You don't have to think about shared expenses. When you live with someone, you have to be considerate," I said. Considerate is communicating, not sending me a Venmo request after I leave. He hung up after that. That was 3 months ago. We haven't spoken since. A few weeks later, I ran into a mutual friend, Nate, who told me Daniel and Emily broke up. Apparently, they'd been arguing a lot about money and boundaries, and she'd been pressuring him about things like rent and spending. Nate said, "Don't take it personally, man. He's been weird with everyone lately." Still, it bothered me. I kept replaying everything, the invitation, the text, the $250, and wondering if I'd actually been out of line. I even asked Ryan, my coworker who travels a lot for work, what he thought. He said, "If someone invites you to stay, it's on them. If they want money, they should say so up front. Otherwise, it's tacky." That made sense to me, but I couldn't shake the guilt completely. Daniel and I had been friends for almost a decade. I'd been in his wedding, well, what was going to be his wedding before they split. We'd spent birthdays, road trips, everything together. To have it end over something so small, it still doesn't sit right. Last week, I decided to reach out one last time. I texted him, "Hey, I heard about the breakup. I'm sorry, man. I know things got weird between us, but I never wanted that. Hope you're doing okay." He didn't respond. That was the moment I realized it wasn't really about the money. Maybe it was pride, maybe pressure from Emily, maybe something else entirely. But it wasn't just about utilities or groceries. It was about control. Who owed who was right. I don't think I'll ever get an explanation, and that's okay. I deleted his number yesterday, not out of anger, but because I think some friendships have an expiration date you don't see until it's passed. I still think about that week sometimes, how it started as a kind gesture and ended as a Venmo charge. It taught me something important, though, that generosity isn't free if it comes with strings you don't see until later, and that sometimes the price of a friendship isn't money at all. It's trust. It's been about 6 months since that week and the fallout, and I've had a lot of time to reflect on what happened with Daniel and why it hurt so much. Honestly, the money was never the real issue. I think I knew that even at the time. It was the principle of it, and the way our friendship suddenly felt transactional. Since then, I've traveled a bit for work and stayed with a few friends in different cities. The difference is night and day. When someone invites me over now, it's clear from the start what the expectations are, if any. I've learned to ask questions up front. Groceries, utilities, timing, so there's no ambiguity. It's made things so much easier and honestly less stressful. I also realized I probably should have communicated better myself. I hadn't explicitly asked if they expected me to pitch in for groceries or utilities. I just assumed that my offer to buy some meals or cook a few dinners was enough. But the awkwardness with Emily clearly made them feel differently, even if it wasn't fair. I can see why they might have felt like they were footing the bill for more than just a guest. It doesn't change how entitled their Venmo request felt, but it gives context. A few weeks ago, I ran into Nate again, our mutual friend, and he filled me in on Daniel. Apparently, he's been moving more cautiously with friends. Nate said Daniel tends to test people now, see who will help and how much before fully trusting them. It made me realize that part of the fallout wasn't really about me at all. It was Daniel projecting his own insecurities. I've also noticed that the way I handled it has changed me. I'm more confident about setting boundaries now. I know when to say yes, when to decline, and when to negotiate expectations up front. I'm also more forgiving of myself. I can see now that I didn't take advantage of him. I was invited, and I acted respectfully. I paid in my own ways, groceries, meals, and helping around the apartment. That should have been enough. I reached out to Ryan about the whole thing recently. He said, friendships sometimes just end because of timing, personalities, or misunderstandings. It's not always a moral failing on either side. That resonated with me. I've spent so much energy wondering if I was wrong, if I should have done something differently. Now I see it as a lesson rather than a failure. Interestingly, a few weeks ago, I started getting messages from mutual acquaintances about Daniel. Apparently, he's gotten into arguments with a couple of friends over similar things. Money, expectations, boundaries. I realized that my situation wasn't unique. It's part of a larger pattern that made it easier to stop ruminating about the week I stayed with him. I've also been more proactive about building new friendships. I've met people through work and hobbies who value honesty and clear communication. These relationships feel reciprocal and comfortable, not fraught with silent expectations or awkward debt discussions. Sometimes I still think about that week. I remember sitting on his couch late at night, trying to work on my laptop, hearing them argue in the kitchen, and feeling like I had somehow intruded. But now I see it differently. That week taught me about compatibility, about recognizing when someone's expectations don't align with yours, and about the importance of clear communication. I haven't heard from Daniel since I sent that last text months ago. Part of me wishes things had ended differently, but another part of me is relieved. I didn't lose a friend over a monetary misunderstanding. I learned what kind of friendships are sustainable and which ones aren't. And honestly, that feels like a win. It's been over a year since the whole Denver incident, and I finally feel like I can put the whole situation to rest. Honestly, I didn't expect this to affect me as much as it did, but it changed a lot about how I view friendships, boundaries, and respect. After the last time I reached out to Daniel and got no response, I stopped thinking about him as someone I could rely on. It was a painful realization, but also liberating. Losing a long-term friend stings, but I can see now that it's not the end of my social life. It's just a reorganization of priorities. Over the past year, I've focused on friendships where there's mutual trust and respect. I've spent more time with coworkers, friends from graduate school, and other people I've met through shared hobbies. These relationships feel healthier. There's no hidden expectation, no subtle judgment if I decline an invitation, and no sudden Venmo requests after the fact. Ryan has been an anchor through all of this. He's seen the stress, the frustration, and the hurt, and he's supported me without question. Living together now, we've developed routines and habits that make me feel grounded and appreciated. His parents still treat me like family, which feels surreal compared to the tension with Daniel. I know I can count on them for support without strings attached. I also spent a lot of time reflecting on my own behavior. I realized that while I wasn't in the wrong, I could have communicated more clearly about what I could contribute while staying at Daniel's apartment, even if it wouldn't have changed the outcome. It's a lesson in proactive communication I can carry forward. Interestingly, I've heard through mutual friends that Daniel has continued to struggle with boundaries in his other relationships. That makes me sad, not because I want to criticize him, but because I recognize the pattern that cost me our friendship. It reinforces my belief that it wasn't personal. It was a structural mismatch in how we define hospitality, boundaries, and reciprocity. A few months ago, I consciously decided to delete his number. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it to give myself closure. I realized that keeping it was a small, unnecessary emotional burden. I also unfollowed him on social media, which has been liberating. I no longer see updates about his life, which removes the subtle reminders of our falling out. Reflecting on that week, I recognize how much it shaped me. I've learned to set boundaries without guilt, to communicate expectations up front, and to evaluate friendships for compatibility rather than history alone. I've also learned to accept that some people aren't capable of maintaining healthy friendships, and that's okay. Not everyone is meant to stay in your life forever. The week I spent at Daniel's apartment will always be a memory that carries a mix of emotions. Gratitude for the invitation, discomfort from the tension, and disappointment in how things ended. But the takeaway isn't bitterness. The takeaway is clarity. I know what I value in friendships, and I know what I won't tolerate. Most importantly, I know I don't have to compromise my principles or comfort for someone else's perception of fairness. True friendship isn't transactional. It's about mutual respect, understanding, and care, things Daniel wasn't willing to practice at that time. I'm at peace now. The friendship is gone, but the lessons remain. I've grown. I've strengthened other connections, and I've learned to trust my judgment. That's worth more than any week-long stay or awkward Venmo request ever could be. Stories number 12. My sister slapped me because I refused to babysit her daughter while she went out to eat. I never thought something as small as saying no could end with me getting slapped across the face by my own sister. But that's exactly what happened a few weeks ago. I'm still processing it. Honestly, I'm 26, living in a small apartment in Ohio. My sister, Jessica, is 31 and lives about 20 minutes away. She's a single mom to my 6-year-old niece, Lily. I love that little girl to pieces. She's sweet, funny, and obsessed with dinosaurs. But Jessica, well, she's exhausting. She's always been the type who thinks the world should rearrange itself for her convenience. I've been helping her out since Lily was born. Babysitting, picking her up from daycare, buying groceries when Jess was short on cash. I don't mind helping sometimes, but lately, it's been constant. She started treating me like her built-in babysitter, not her brother. It started small. Can you watch Lily while I run to the store? Or can you pick her up today? I'm stuck in traffic, but over the last few months, it's escalated into her dropping Lily off without warning, or calling me 5 minutes before she's supposed to clock in and saying, "Hey, I need you to take Lily tonight. I'm going out." Every time I'd tell her, "Jess, I can't just drop everything," she'd guilt-trip me. "You don't know how hard it is being a single mom." Or, "Lily loves spending time with you. Why are you being so selfish?" And yeah, I'd cave every time because I didn't want to let my niece down. But that night, it went way too far. It was a Saturday evening, around 6 p.m. I had just finished cleaning my apartment, and was actually excited to spend the night alone for once. I'd ordered takeout, had my playlist going, and was in full relaxation mode when Jessica called. "Hey," she said casually, "can you watch Lily for a few hours?" "I'm going to dinner with some friends," I said. "Jess, I already made plans tonight. Can't you find someone else?" She sighed dramatically. "Come on. It's just a couple hours. I need a break." "You know how hard it is doing everything on my own," I told her. "You've gone out 3 times this week already. I'm not trying to be mean, but you can't keep relying on me last minute." She got quiet for a second, then said, "So you're really going to say no to your niece?" "I'm not saying no to her," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'm saying no to you. You need to plan better." Then she hung up. I thought that was the end of it, until 15 minutes later. There was a knock at my door. I opened it, and there she was, holding Lily's little pink backpack. Before I could even say anything, she said, "You can be mad at me later. I need to go." I stepped in front of the door. "No, Jess. You can't just drop her off here like this." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, stop being dramatic. She loves being here." "I'll be back in a couple of hours," I said. "No, you didn't ask. You told me, and I'm not doing this tonight." That's when her whole face changed. She looked at me like I'd just insulted her soul. "You're unbelievable," she snapped. "You think you're better than me just because you don't have a kid? You have no idea how hard my life is." I said, "Jess, I get that it's hard, but that doesn't mean you get to dump your kid on me whenever you want. You need to respect my time too." And then, before I could even blink, she slapped me. Hard. It wasn't just a little smack either. It was one of those full-arm, loud-as-hell slaps that made my cheeks sting instantly. Lily gasped. She was standing right there, clutching her stuffed triceratops, eyes wide like she couldn't believe what she just saw. I didn't even yell. I just froze. I looked at Jessica, who suddenly looked as shocked as I was. Like she hadn't processed what she'd done, I said very quietly. "Get out!" She started crying immediately. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "Jess," I said, cutting her off, "take Lily and leave right now." She hesitated, looking between me and Lily, but I didn't move. I just pointed toward the door. She picked up Lily's backpack, grabbed her hand and left, the second the door closed. I just sat down on the couch, shaking. I've never been hit by anyone in my life, especially not my own sister. It wasn't even the pain. It was the shock of realizing that our relationship had reached that point. A few hours later, she texted me, "I'm sorry. I was stressed and lost it. Please don't hate me." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just needed space. The next day, my mom called me asking what happened. Apparently, Jessica had gone crying to her saying I refused to help when she needed me the most. I told Mom exactly what happened, including the slap. She went completely silent. Then she said, "That's not okay, turns out." Jessica hadn't told her that part. Mom said she'd talk to her, but that I should probably take some distance for a while, and that's what I did. I didn't see or talk to Jessica for almost 3 weeks. During that time, I missed Lily like crazy. She'd always been the little sunshine in my life, the one who'd draw me pictures or tell me about her Dino adventures. I kept wondering what she must have thought. Seeing her mom hit me, that thought hurt more than anything. Then one day I got a text from Lily, or technically from Jessica's phone, but it was clearly Lily typing. It said, "I miss you, Uncle Sam." "Mommy says she's sorry," I cried. I didn't want to, but I did. A few days later, Jessica reached out again, asking to meet for coffee. I almost said no, but curiosity got the better of me. We met at a little diner downtown. The irony wasn't lost on me, and she looked wrecked. No makeup, tired eyes, hands shaking around her cup. She said, "I don't have an excuse for what I did. I was angry and tired, and I took it out on you. I hate myself for it," I said. "You can't ever do that again." "Jess, not to me, not to anyone," she nodded, crying again. "I know. I've been seeing a counselor since it happened. I didn't realize how burned out I was. I thought I could handle everything on my own, but I can't." We sat there for almost 2 hours. She apologized at least 10 times. I told her I forgave her, but that things couldn't go back to how they were. I told her I'd still be there for Lily, but I wasn't her backup plan anymore. She agreed. Now, months later, things are calmer. Jessica's been making a real effort. She's gotten better at planning ahead. She hired a regular babysitter, and she's been going to therapy every week. We've even had a few family dinners again. I still get a little tense when she asks for help, but now, when I say no, she actually respects it. As for Lily, she's still her happy, Dino-loving self. When I visit, she runs into my arms like nothing ever happened, and I just hold her a little tighter each time. That night changed a lot of things between me and Jessica. It broke something, but it also forced both of us to face reality. She needed to get her life under control, and I needed to set boundaries I should have set a long time ago. Family is messy, sometimes literally, sometimes emotionally. But I learned that loving someone doesn't mean letting them cross every line. Sometimes love looks like saying no, even if it costs you peace in the moment. And if there's one thing I know now, it's that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to move forward without carrying the slap with you. Update. It's been a couple of months since the diner incident, and things have been complicated, but in a way that's slowly improving. I never thought I'd feel simultaneously relieved and anxious about my sister. But that's where we're at, after our coffee meetup. Jessica seemed genuinely remorseful. She started actively trying to repair things with Lily and me. The first real sign came a week later when she sent me a text asking if I could pick Lily up for her after school. Not as a last-minute demand, but with 24 hours notice I agreed. And when I got there, she was waiting outside to personally hand Lily over and thank me. That simple gesture meant a lot. It was a far cry from her old habit of just dropping Lily off at my place without warning. Still, it hasn't been perfect. There are moments where I can feel her old entitlement sneaking back. One evening, she asked me to watch Lily so she could run errands, and I immediately thought back to that night at the diner. My first instinct was to say no, but I took a deep breath and replied calmly, "I can help, but only if you plan ahead next time." She hesitated, then agreed, promising she'd schedule a babysitter next time. That felt like progress. Therapy has been a game changer for her. She's been more reflective about why she lost her temper and hit me that night. She admitted she was overwhelmed, resentful, and simply didn't know how to ask for help without expecting me to drop everything. Hearing her articulate that made me see her more clearly, not just as my frustrating sister, but as someone struggling under pressure. It hasn't erased what happened, but it has helped me process it. Lily, as always, remains the bright spot. She doesn't remember all the tension that night, thankfully, when I spend time with her. She's just Lily, drawing, asking about dinosaurs, or attempting to teach me to roar like a T-Rex. Those moments remind me why I care so much, and why I'm willing to set boundaries rather than completely step away. I've also started being more assertive about my boundaries. If Jessica asks for help without notice, I'm honest about my availability. I've learned that saying no isn't being cruel. It's being responsible for my own time and energy. Surprisingly, she started respecting that. There was a moment last week where she actually said, "I know you have plans, so I'll figure it out," and didn't push further. That felt like a huge win. Mom and Dad have been supportive. 2. After learning about the slap, they've encouraged Jessica to continue therapy and also encouraged me to maintain my boundaries. My mom even joked one night, "It's like we all had a wake-up call," and she wasn't wrong. That night forced all of us to confront some unhealthy dynamics. What's weird is that despite everything, our relationship has subtly improved. There's still tension and moments of irritation, but I can see her trying, and I respect that. She's more aware of her limitations and more willing to accept help without guilt-tripping me. And for the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells around her. I don't know if our relationship will ever be normal, whatever that means, but I do know that things are better than they were, and that's enough for now. Lily still runs into my arms with a smile, and that's the most important thing. Jessica is still my sister, complicated as she is, and I'm learning how to love her while protecting my own sanity. The slap was awful, no one can sugarcoat that, but in the long run, it forced a conversation we desperately needed. Boundaries were set, apologies were made, and for the first time in a long time, I feel like our little family, messy, flawed, but still connected, might actually be okay. Final update. It's been almost a year since the diner incident, and looking back, it's wild how much has changed. Honestly, I didn't think I'd ever feel at peace with Jessica after that night. But here we are. After our coffee talk and a few honest conversations over the following months, Jessica really seemed to step up. Therapy helped her process her stress and anger, and I started noticing little changes in how she approached me and Lily. She's no longer springing last-minute babysitting requests on me, and when she does ask, it's with actual notice and respect for my schedule. For example, last month she texted, "Hey, can you watch Lily Saturday afternoon? Totally understand if you have plans." That phrasing alone made me realize she was internalizing the boundary I'd set that night. Lily has been the best part of this whole process. She's still the same joyful, dinosaur-obsessed kid. But now when she comes to my apartment, there's no tension in the air. She'll just run in, give me a hug, and tell me about her day at school. I treasure those moments, and I think they've helped me forgive Jessica fully. Because Lily shouldn't have to carry the weight of adult mistakes. Jessica and I have slowly rebuilt a healthier sibling relationship. We're still not best friends, and we still clash occasionally. But the fights aren't personal attacks anymore. There's more respect now. I can say no to her without guilt, and she can admit when she's wrong without defensiveness. It's surreal after the slap and all the tension that followed, but it's real. We've even started having occasional family dinners with my parents and Lily, where it doesn't feel like a minefield. Jessica jokes now about her old behavior, saying things like, "Remember that night at your apartment when I lost it?" Yeah, not my proudest moment. And I can laugh with her because she's owning it, not excusing it. One of the biggest changes has been her trust in me. She knows I love Lily and will always be there for her. But she no longer tries to make me the automatic solution for her problems. She's more proactive now, hiring babysitters, managing her schedule, and even taking small breaks without guilt-tripping me. That balance has made our relationship feel less like a tug-of-war and more like cooperation. Mom and Dad notice it too, my mom said recently. It's like the slap was a wake-up call for all of us. Jessica, you, even me. Things just had to hit rock bottom to get better. And she's right. That night forced us to face uncomfortable truths. We had to confront Jessica's stress, my limits, and the unhealthy patterns we'd all gotten used to. I think the biggest lesson I've learned is about boundaries and forgiveness. Setting a boundary doesn't make you selfish, it makes you human. And forgiving someone doesn't mean forgetting the mistake. It means choosing to move forward without letting it control your relationship. I love my sister, but I also love myself enough not to be her punching bag. That balance wasn't easy, but it's essential. Now, whenever Lily runs into my arms, giggling about her latest dinosaur discovery or asking me to help her draw a new fossil, I feel nothing but warmth. The slap is a memory, yes, a shocking, hurtful one, but it also marked the start of real change. Jessica has grown, I've grown, and our relationship is healthier because of it. Family is messy, imperfect, and sometimes painful, but it can also be resilient. We're not perfect, we never will be. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like we're moving forward in a way that works for everyone. And honestly, that's all I could ever hope for.